with our educator workforce. So those are the big 5 components. I'll go through the other pages in the site, but now that you understand how the page is laid out, you'll understand how to interpret every single page of the site, because they all just have those 5 repeating components. Right at the top is the explanation of the page. Over to the right is the highlights. Below that is the filters. In the center is the summary data. Down at the bottom, the table of data that you could sort, search, download, do whatever you want with it. From this educator workforce page, I have these buttons where I can then jump to the other pages within the educator workforce section. So if I want to jump to retention rates, I click retention rates and I'm jumping to retention rates. You'll see we have those same components. Even though I'm looking at totally different data and the explanation is different, where I find the explanation, where I find the data, how I filter it is all laid out the same. And so now if I look at the explanation on the retention rate data, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see it. So when we look at retention rate, what we're looking at is the retention status of every licensed staff from October 1 of the prior year to October 1 of the next year.
How they break down what the state's obligation is.
All licensed staff who were employed October 1, 2023, the 23-24 school year, and were still employed or not still employed in October 1, 2024 of this current school year. For every licensed staff, they have one of 5 possible retention statuses. The first one is that they are a stayer. This is a person who has the same job classification at the same school year over year. So if I'm a teacher at Gibbons Elementary last October, and I'm still teaching at Gibbons Elementary the next school year, I'm a stayer. I stayed in my job at the same school location. The next is a school mover. This is someone who keeps the same job classification, but they change schools within the same district. So if I am a teacher at Gibbons Elementary this year and next year, I am teaching at Orr Middle School. I'm still teaching, but I've moved schools within the district. The next designation is district mover. So I keep the same job classification. So I'm a teacher at Gibbons Elementary this year, and next year I move out to Nye County and I'm teaching there. So I'm a district mover. The next is a switcher. I've switched job classification. I was a teacher and now I'm an AP. So I switched my job classification. The last is a leaver. This is someone who was working in the district and they moved and are no longer working, or they didn't necessarily move. They just are no longer working in education. So where do these metrics come from? This is metrics that come from the U.S. Department of Education. So they periodically put out a report called Teacher Attrition and Mobility, and they classify retention into one of 3 categories. People are either stayers, movers, or leavers. And so the one difference is because we have more granular data, we kind of break it out a little bit. So they have movers, and we break that out to school mover and district mover, because people care to know the difference. Did I move around within my district or did I leave my district? So we break out mover into school mover, district mover. For leavers, we break it out to leaver and switcher. So we know when the US Ed reports it, if you go from teacher to administrator, you left teaching, even though you still work in the organization. We are breaking it out just to provide that extra context, right? That where it's not necessarily that they've left education, they've just switched job classifications. So this is where those metrics come from. It is national. If you wanted to compare to national, you just would group those 2 together to compare movers and leavers, and stayers is the same definition. Same job classification, same school. So that's the explanation of our retention rate data. Over on the right, just like the other pages where we have the highlights about the retention data. Down below that is where we have the filters. So if you want to filter to a different school year, a specific district, a specific school, and then we have the summary data that's in the chart. So the way it's set up there, you can kind of see the legend at the top for the color coding. But basically, to the right is the stayers, and then to the left is the breakdown of all the other categories. If you click on any of the bars or hover over them, you can get all the details as well. Then down below is where component 5 is. And this is where we have the person level data. So for every licensed employee who's employed October 1, 2023, what was happening to them October 1, 2024. So I can see here, these are some teachers at Abston Elementary. The first teacher, she moved schools. The next 4 teachers continued to teach at that school. So now you can see the retention status of all the individual people who made up that aggregated data. Just like in the educator, or just like the other pages, I could jump to these, the other parts. So now if I want to jump to district comparison, so what we've seen is looking essentially at one entity at a time. What if I want to compare across entities? I click district comparison, I see those same components again, right? And so I have the explainer, the highlights, the data. The big difference on this page is when we're looking at one entity, we're looking at the staffing rates of teachers, non-classroom staff, administrators, all at once for a single entity. When we want to compare across entities, we can only look at one metric at a time. So here we're comparing across districts the number of licensed teachers per 1,000 students. If I want to compare the number of administrators, I just switch to administrators per 1,000. So the big difference, entity, you can see all the metrics at once for that single entity. Comparing across entities, you have to just pick one metric to compare. But otherwise, it's all organized. It all means the same thing. If I want to look at retention rates, I just click retention, and now I'm looking at the retention rates of teachers across district. If I want to look at administrators, I can just switch the filter to administrators, and now I'm looking at the retention rate of administrators. I go down to the bottom, and now I'm looking at a table. It is the aggregate data of those entities, right? So I'm looking at district comparison now, so the table has the district data. When I'm looking at a single entity, I see the individual people. When I'm comparing entities, I see the entity level data. So that's what's in the table when comparing districts. If I go over to compare schools, it's the same thing. So I click school comparison, and now I'm comparing across schools. One of the cool things that you can do here, if you really like to explore data, right? I could be looking at all the schools in the state. I could be looking at the schools within a district, or as what I'm doing here, I can compare a specific group of schools. So here I'm comparing the staffing rates of 5-star elementary schools. I can compare the staffing rates of Title I schools. I can compare the staffing rates of rural schools. Whatever I want to do, I can kind of filter to that. So you have the robustness to do a lot of different analysis, but at the same time, you can just ignore all that and just keep it simple, which would be what a majority of people do. If you don't know what the school categories are, you just click that button. It shows you what all of your options are and explains what they mean specifically. So that is the educator workforce portion of the website. So all those highlights I showed you before in this presentation, about there being more teachers and retention rates, everyone now will have access to all that information to look at whatever they want to do at whatever level they want to look at. If I want to go over to class sizes, it's arranged the same way, whereas I can kind of type in here to go to a specific school or a specific teacher's class, or I can click to go into look at the state as a whole. So if I click elementary class sizes, it takes me into the site where now I'm looking at the average elementary class sizes. This is the average class size experience of students. You'll see, even though now we're looking at class size information, we have those same components. So you know where to look for an explanation, where to look to filter, where to look for the summary, and then down below where you'll see all of the individual information. So in this table below is where we see every individual course section that is being used to aggregate this class size experience. Can you just move ahead a slide? Huh? There you go. So now, just like we see in a lot of the AB 304 reports, you'll have the report of the class size for each individual section. So this is where a parent can see their own kid's class and that information. So let me jump up to that introductory part of the page that explains what we're doing here with class size experience. So this analysis is limited to classes that utilize traditional face-to-face instruction. So we're not including giant online courses or the blended learning courses where it would just really throw things off that we don't have a way to handle right now. So this is traditional face-to-face classes. And what we're doing is we are doing what we call the average class size experience. And what that means is we're doing the averaging at the student level instead of the class level. So what does that mean? Let me just share a very simple example. So imagine there's two classes, one with a class of 30 kids and one with a class of 6 kids. In a traditional average class size, the averaging happens at the class level. So class of 30, class of 6, that's 36. Divide by 2, you get an average class size of 18. And we're averaging the two class sizes. If instead we average the student's experience, now there's 30 with a class size of experience of 30, and there's 6 with a class size experience of 6. So that's 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus 30, right? 30 times, plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, divided by the 36 kids. And now the average class size experience is 26. So what you can see is that by doing it, averaging it the kids' experience, we have a number that much more represents what's actually happening than an average class size of 18. So the average class size experience is 26 versus the average class, which is 18. This is to address those frustrations that educators brought forth to the legislative committee to say these ratios do not represent what people are experiencing. So this is a way to provide a number that much more accurately represents what students and teachers are experiencing in the classroom.
Really?
This is a method that we use in a prior legislative session. So we've done this work with the State Department before. It is not something that blows people's mind, right? It might sound like, oh, wait, do I really get it? Like, you don't need to completely, you can get it, but like, you can also just understand, like, yes, I see how 26 more accurately represents than 18. And people accept it and we move on. There aren't going to be riots in the street because this isn't the methodology they once knew. Right? All of the classroom level data is there so people can see what's happening, what's included, what's not included, and they get a much more accurate representation of what's happening. So that's what average class size experience is. But you know, kind of a great analogy I've heard before, right? Like when you want to know the time and you ask them the time, right? They could tell you how the watch works, but you really just need to know the time. And so people can get here and learn how these calculations work, but they really just want to know these average class size experience. When we're looking at the elementary level, overwhelmingly across the state, elementary classes are like a self-contained class. A single teacher is teaching math, reading, social studies. So we don't break it out by individual subjects. We break it out by grade level. So you get the average class size experience by grade level that is similar to what is reported on Nevada report card. If I switch over to secondary, this is where class sizes are different across subjects. So now we're reporting average class size experience by subject area. And we're doing the 4 core subject areas. Again, that's in line with what's reported on Nevada report card. So we get the average class size experience for English, math, science, and history. Down below is the table where you could then filter to a specific course or a specific teacher. You could search for a specific thing, you could sort it, and you can see everything that's included or not included and see what it is that we're talking about. To do district comparison, I click that, and now I'm just comparing the class sizes across districts. Now, this class size data, we're still working with districts and charters to validate and clean up. So what you're seeing here is a representation. That's why it says District A, District B, District C. This data will be completed in the coming weeks. So, but what we're demonstrating here is how this functions and works and how you'll have access to individual classes all the way up to statewide averages.
Please go ahead, Member Carlton.
Thank you. At the risk of throwing a wrench in the works here, trying to wrap my brain around your previous formula where I did 30 plus 30 plus 30 and got to 26. I don't think okay, I'm just gonna ask it a different way. So if I would use this dashboard, is there a way for me to find out how many classes have 26 and above? How many classes have 12 to 25? How many classes have 6 to 12? Rather than looking at averages, could I find out that there's 1,000 classes that have 26 and above and 30 classes that have 0 to 6? Is there a way to find that?
Yes.
Okay,
So if you
point me in the right direction.
you look at the screen right now.
Yeah.
That table that's right below that shows every individual section that's used for that analysis. So here I could see if I read across that top row, it's the school year 24-25, Churchill's the school district. I'm looking at the middle school. I could see the course name, the period name, the section number, the teacher name, and then the student count is 20. Any of these columns can be sorted. So I could sort student count and I will see the largest class all the way down to the smallest class. If I want to,
I have to get somebody to help me out here.
yeah.
Oh, okay, I see. There was a glare there. Okay. Thank you. Hey, no, I've always had a problem with averages because they really don't reflect what's going on in the classroom. Median is much better. I understand what you're trying to do because the general public looks at averages. The political world looks at averages. I really want to know how many classrooms are really big and how many classrooms are small and how do we adjust that? So thank you very much.
Perfect. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Is there's people who just tell me the high level number. Just tell me the number, and you got to give them something. So that's where we have what is the most accurate representation of a high level number we can do, which is the average class size experience. But for people who really want to dig in, they have exactly that point of view, which is, I don't trust the average. I want to know, are there classes with over 40 kids right now? Or do we have teachers who we're expecting to deal with 40, 45 kids in the class? Sort that last column and you will know exactly where that's happening. So that is what we're trying to do with this, is address those concerns of, we don't want to mass things. We want to get people engaged with this information, right? And it's going to be across all kinds of different ways, right? One that we've already talked about today is how do we celebrate how effective this investment in education has been to repairing our teacher workforce? That's one thing. Next, how do we dig in and think about what do we want to fix next? And where are those examples? So this is really meant to be a tool that functions on all of those purposes. High level, very specific, and everything in between.
So Nathan, we have other board members with questions. So my question to you is, do you want to go through the last 15 slides expeditiously to get to the questions, or?
Yeah, I can do that really quick.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that.
It's not much left.
Okay. And Angie, real quick for the record, can you note at 10:40 member Walker joined us, please? Thank you.
So that's the class size, right? We see it all down below. I can filter any of these things when I'm comparing across districts or schools. Again, I just have to pick which metric I want to look at because I have to pick one at a time. So it might be 5th grade class size, it might be secondary math, whatever it is, one metric across entities. That's the class size data. Next is the research component. So this is where if I want to access any of the files, I click data files. It takes me to a page where I can see any of the data from this site. So I can see this data file will give me a school directory. These are all the schools in Nevada. And we put in it different school IDs. So you have the NCES ID. So if you want to connect any of this data to federal government data, you can. We have the state ID. So if you want to connect any of this data to Nevada report card, you can. Right? You have all that flexibility. From this dropdown, I pick whatever file I want. I could download it. I have the business rules. So this is really meant super simple for any parent, super robust for really sophisticated analysis. So that's the website. Kind of the next steps. The tentative go live is to try and get this live by the end of the month. So what needs to happen between now and then is we're continuing to work with districts and charters on truing up and getting their class size data accurate, which means kind of putting codes in correctly so that we're pulling the right math classes, things like that. We'll then support district and charter leadership with what this means and building awareness with other critical partners. and then hopefully go live. So to summarize, really big level, right? We've seen Nevada struggling with their teacher workforce for years and years and years. The department did a study that showed here's the path, here's what it would take, brought together coalitions that resulted in the largest increase in education funding in the country, and has now led to a complete turnaround in our teacher workforce, where teacher attrition rates have improved by 30%. Retention rates have improved across all levels. The number of classroom teachers is up by over 1,200 across the state. And there's now a licensed staff member for every 15.7 students. And that culminated in the creation of this website. So you don't have to just trust those highlights. You can get granular data and engage with this any way you want. Done.
Thank you, Nathan, so much for all the information. It was very, very helpful. And I love that you mentioned the dashboard is FERPA compliant and also aligns with the federal reporting metrics in terms of end size. So thank you for sharing that. I know Member Hudson has a question. I know others do as well.
Member Hudson, for the record. So 2 questions, because I didn't hear that for here. So is this something that the state, I don't know, that you're hoping that will be eventually used when it comes to like getting the ratios? I forgot the second part of the ratio, the classroom reduction. Like, would you guys, is it like something hopeful that we would want the legislation to eventually use instead of that 18? Because I'm like, oh, realistically, me being an autism teacher, my 8 kids do sometimes feel like 30 kids at a time. So like, is that something realistically, like you guys would rather for them to use the experience instead of that, the first number is, I guess I'll let you answer that one before I go to my next one.
So
that makes sense.
But I think it does. So I don't have a recommendation for what the legislator should do. But we did try to make a tool, and not only this individual tool, but the infrastructure, right, which is kind of how we've coded courses across the entire state so that we can get to a point of an apples to apples comparison across districts and schools, which did not exist before. So really it's about like, how do we create a robust framework that then that discussion can happen to say, what's the best way to get to what we're trying to get to? So every situation is kind of different. So I'm not going to say right now what I recommend for a specific situation, but rather we try to build a system that's robust enough that has the flexibility to be more purposeful in how we work with and talk about data.
Okay, my next question. Only because looking at the STEP, so I don't know if this is to the department or you, but is this something that either the state could use when it comes to retaining teachers, or like when it comes to like, oh, we see that this number of school, or I'm just going to throw my school under, but my school doesn't have this issue. But if May Elementary School dropped in numbers of retaining teachers, like would that be something that the state or a district could go in and then provide them support to see like what could happen? Would there be some type of support for those schools when they see that? Yeah, like will we be having resources also? Because I see like the potential, like this would be a very good tool for not only schools, but districts along with the state also to use to see how can we support those at-risk schools or Title I schools when they have that high rate, that turnover rate. So would this also be included?
I'm looking at Superintendent Ebert.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, that is exactly why this tool was built, right? There's a lot of conversations on individual experiences and what individuals bring to the table, but we are focusing on the data. And so now that this data has been made available, it is available for individual principal. Right, we start at the level of where any issue is happening. So starting at the school level, having conversations, superintendents having conversations with their principals, having the teachers have the conversation, why did this happen? Is it just coincidental that, half the staff at that moment in time was able to retire? nothing more than not making more or less, or especially in Clark County School District, another school opened, right? So it looks, but then the teachers be grouped in a leaver group because they needed to go because the school shrunk in size. So it's having the data, but then it'll be incumbent upon those that are the data, if you will, to look at it and examine and determine root cause. And then, yes, at the Department of Education level, we would provide supports to district leaders in those instances, if supports are needed.
Well, thank you. Just one last comment. I do appreciate this website wherever we go with it, because it does allow us to have some type of transparency and then give the community an understanding of, well, this is what we were doing, the class size ratio, but the experiences are X, Y, and Z. So I do appreciate the work that was done behind creating this platform as well.
Thank you, Member Hudson. We have Member Ford and then Member Orr. Thank you. I have 3 questions. The first one is, does this website optimize for mobile easily, or is it like a desktop version you have to zoom into on your phone?
It works on mobile.
Oh, so it moves all around and it's really easy to navigate.
If the screen was shrink, right, like the filter component would move down and fit on a phone really nicely.
I know like some certain organizations will not do that, and it's so hard to find stuff on the phone. Okay, that's great. That's like 80% of users are on mobile. And then I just think this is great, 100. But some other questions I had as far as like, to what extent can we use this? The first one is, does it produce data, for example, for if somebody was like a stayer or a school mover for multiple years, could you see like schools that have a long time staff, or could you see if an individual hops around a lot to different schools every year?
So the way it's currently set up, right, is we're prioritizing ease of access and use. So from the main dashboards, you wouldn't be able to answer that question, because you start to get down these kind of rabbit holes of like, I really want to investigate this thing. But that's where you can download any of these files and you could look at and answer all those questions. So you would be able to see what happened to a person over multiple years, or you could aggregate, you could open up multiple windows and just pick different years and look at a school side by side. So
somebody who has
the interest to do that, this has the flexibility to answer those questions.
That's great. The last one is very similar, but can it provide the info, like, for instance, how many of the teachers have 1 to 2 years experience or 10 years experience? Because even though, like, I think we're doing great with our attrition, does a school have, or a district consist of 50% plus of experienced educators, or are 90% at a school less than 3 years? Does it have that kind of info?
So right now, it does not. So we don't have the number of years of experience for individual teachers, but essentially as this expands over time, it'll be there. So right now, the staffing, I think, is this year and last year, and it'll go forward.
Okay, and this isn't a comment for you, but for like everybody, I think we're doing great. We need to, be able to celebrate the wins that we're having. And I do think that the investment in education contributed to this, of course, but I personally think a lot of our educators are new and that we have lost a lot of our really experienced educators. So I would love to see some way to get some data around and see at a school level, district level, what schools have actual experienced educators and which have coming. That's all. Thank you. Thank you. Member Orr and then Member Hughes.
Hi, this is Member Orr. I want to thank you for putting together this very easy to read and understand data portal. We at my own school, we use some of your products, and so thank you, Data Insight Partners. I think you do a great job with making data accessible to people in the community. So I really appreciate that, and I really applaud the NDE for trying to really highlight data and make use of it, I do want to call attention to two things. So I do want to go back to the public comment brought to the table by Washoe County School Districts. I just want to ask a few questions about that because I think it's important. And then I also just always want to talk about unintended consequences and maybe ask if there were some people from the public brought in to ask questions about some of that. So first, just a few questions about privacy and data. Like, are there any concerns or thought about unintended consequences? Would it make any sense to just use educator numbers instead of specific names in the portal? Like, would that change anything? Would it be possible to just use second grade teacher and a number, or 10th grade math teacher and not be using educator names?
So for the record, this is Nathan Trenholm. That is something that could possibly be done. The trade-off there, if we look at the frustrations that were voiced by Superintendent Klein, right? If we want this to be something that parents can use, then they need to know their child's name, their child's teacher's name. There's no number that they're going to look up to find their kid's class. So part of this and kind of his suggestions back at that 2020 meeting is that this type of information should be sortable by teacher and searchable by teacher, because if we want this to be something parents and the community are engaging with, for them, they'll look by their child's teacher. So that's the trade-off. And that's why, kind of, again, if we look at the frustrations we were trying to alleviate and what we're trying to accomplish with this, that's the purpose.
Is there any way to look at class sizes that might be larger and see if class sizes are impacted by things like teachers' assistants or classes that might have additional teachers like special education co-teachers in them?
So right now we have two kind of portions to the site, right? There's the educator workforce, and then there is the class size. So in the educator workforce is where you could see all the people who are working in the school and the ratios of staff to students. For the class size, the limitations of what we have at this time with our data systems, we don't have a reliable way to say, is there an aide in this class? And if so, is it an aide who's working with like 2 students and comes once a week? Or is it, this is co-taught, there's 2 teachers in this class dealing with half. So right now, the ability to add that sophistication is something that essentially the state's Infinite Campus Governing Board would have to tackle to figure out how would we record that accurately across the state in Infinite Campus to denote those things. Right now, that's not something that's available.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any concerns that by labeling teachers as like stayers or movers, that it actually erodes trust when we're trying to build up the idea of educators as professionals, like that it might actually have an adverse impact on trying to build up teachers wanting to stay in the profession? That, for instance, the unintended consequence would be that parents would call schools and say, like, I've looked this up and I want my child to be in this 4th grade classroom because I can see that that teacher's a stayer and I don't want them in a movers classroom, something like that. Instead of, understanding the background behind why that teacher might be a mover, and it would have an unintended consequence that would be negative rather than the positive reasons why we're putting this into place.
So I think that can be a valid concern, but I don't think that that's a concern that this website creates. Right? I think that parents right now already want to choose their kid's teacher, and they already ask other parents, Did your kid have that teacher? Is that teacher new in this school? Like, the parents who are doing that will do that whether this site exists or not. Does this site make it easier for parents to engage with what's going on in their school? I hope so. But does it create parents who want to pick their kid's teacher and talk to other parents about which is the good teacher and which is the bad teacher and why they don't like this teacher because that teacher looked at them funny at pick up and drop off, right? I think that the parents who do that will do that whether this site exists or not.
Okay. And so just as, just one more, I mean, there are so many of these, obviously, so many of these types of issues, but, one more thing might be that a parent could easily see that their child's second period algebra class has 32 children in it and their child got a C on their exam and they're worried about them, but there's another second period algebra class that only has 22 kids in it and demand a shift, and that's a scheduling nightmare. Like, I guess I'm just wondering what type of feedback you received from people in schools about that type of scheduling, and if you kind of heard from people in schools about that type of live data and if they had concerns about that or if these are not concerns. So again, I'm a big fan of transparency and data, but you can also see that there might be unintended consequences of people on the outside not understanding the complexities of scheduling and such and believing that there are easy solutions. So I'm just wondering what kind of feedback you received from people in the school setting.
So the feedback that you just relayed would be the same. But again, like we demonstrated earlier, this is already reported, right? So Washoe is already reporting every section and class size. So if you wanted to see that, you already can, right? And for most of the other districts, they're also including the teacher's name. But for the example where a parent wants their kid in the class of 20 kids instead of 30 kids, the teacher's name would be irrelevant, right? Because I can already see in the Washoe report that there is a class with 20 kids, and there's a class with 30 kids. So I just share that to say those actions from parents exist whether this website exists or not.
Thank you, Nathan, for sharing that. And thank you, Member Orr, for the questions. I also, since this isn't exactly live yet, so all these unintended consequences, the what if scenarios, should they come up and be problems and they're reported to our board, we will certainly reach out and share those with you, because I know some of these questions are hard to answer because this actually hasn't gone live yet. So I know we have Member Hughes and Member Braxton and a Member else, and then we will take a quick bio break before moving on to the next presentation.
Okay, thanks. Member Hughes for the record. And similarly, I love a good data dashboard and appreciate modernizing some of our data infrastructure, which is hugely important. The two things I just wanted to comment on, I'm going to try to limit myself here. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to limit myself to two. One is, I guess, one thought / concern I have. So ultimately, our goal and our charge is to improve student outcomes and experiences. And like, you need the data to be able to make decisions, but teachers, they are a very large input, one of the most important inputs in that equation, but it is not, I'm worried that we're going to give people a false sense that filling all of our vacancies equals better student outcomes. And we look at the student outcomes juxtaposed against the gains we saw in attrition and retention and all those numbers, right? They are disproportionate. And so I think we have, so I think it would be wise of us to make smart actions. It's like, we're not just trying to get these numbers up, but we should actually, I know if you're like a savvy data person, researcher, you could triangulate with the Nevada, portal for the academic achievement data, but I think we should be doing that for people because we should actually see, does this make a difference for kids? So it's great if you have a person in front of you, are they good? Are they effective? Right? And we should be looking at those numbers because that's where you take strategic action So I understand that it's a starting place, but would just love to see us integrate those better, because that's why we're doing this and that's why we have this data. It's not important by itself, right? It's only important as much as it impacts the student experience, and we need to be able to more closely link those two. And then the second comment I would just make is I do worry that we are on the class size piece promoting a false narrative and perpetuating a false narrative that class size is like a magic silver bullet solution. And I understand that for politicians, it's very easy to understand. Like smaller class sizes are good, right? Like that's like a very easy soundbite. I understand from a parent perspective, they want their kid to feel cared for. And so it's very logical that if you have fewer people under your purview, that you can spend more individualized attention. But the real issue is teacher workload. And this is one of many factors around teacher workload. So when you talk to parents and say, would you prefer a class size of 40 with the most skilled teacher in the district or a class size of 5 with a long-term sub, like they're going to choose 40. And so it's just more nuanced, I think. And, it's like, when I was in the classroom, taught middle school science, I had a lot of kids. Like, sure, like I would gladly take more kids if I had less grading to do, if I had less compliance reporting to do, right? And so I think it overly simplifies a much more complex issue that educators face. It's really about their overall workload and is it sustainable to be effective in that role? And again, we have to be cautious because if this is the one data point we're putting out to the public, this is what people will latch on to and think this is the solution. And if this were the solution, we would not have the challenges in education because like people have been working at class size for forever and the results still are not what they need to be. And so just want to caution us of like putting too much emphasis on class size as a sole variable because it's one of, hundreds of factors that we should be looking at. And I don't want to limit our imagination by figuring out what solutions we could be doing because we're highlighting this one thing over others. So again, I get why people like it. I get why it's like the cool thing to talk about, simple thing to talk about. But when you talk to educators, it's much more nuanced than how many kids are sitting in front of them.
Thank you, Member Hughes. Before we go on to Member Braxton, would you mind pulling down your presentation so the camera can follow the speaker for those who are watching online? Appreciate it. Thank you. Member Braxton, go ahead with your question or comment when you're ready.
Sure. Well, I have one comment and one question. And comment is kudos. Well, kudos to you, right, for putting together a tool that is a good starting point to address the questions that parents may have, legislators may have. There are lots of questions on many things. And when organizing a bunch of data, sometimes it's very difficult to figure out where to start and where to end. And so I was able to follow the quantitative aspect that you presented, right? The data, but follow it in a way that would lead me to ask more questions. And perhaps that is the intent. This is a wonderful tool to marry the two, the quantitative data and then the qualitative data that might come later with the questions about how teachers are experiencing teaching and how students are experiencing learning in the classroom. So great job. My question is related to, on one of the slides, you mentioned that this excludes online and blended learning classes, right? And so if we're looking at the whole student population, we want to make sure that we can include those two groups and the teachers as well. And so with this tool, it seems as though the online learner or the blended learning classes are minoritized, if you will, and they too have a story, right? So I just want to recognize that. And so the question is, are you saying that it is not possible to reflect that experience quantitatively? And if so, will you put an explanation as to why that is?
Thank you for the comment and the question. For the record, my name is Nathan Sherm. I will answer your question with what you said first, which is we have to start somewhere, right? And so the thing is, how do we get something where we show what's possible, right? And that means we're gonna do this, bring this down to like the simplest, most straightforward thing that we can, right? Because like you mentioned, I mean, we got all kinds of different schools doing all kinds of different teaching methods with all kinds of delivery instructional modes that are different. So we start with core courses that are traditionally face-to-face in our traditional schools. So we didn't include prison schools. We didn't include some of the special schools. We didn't include online learning. And the reason is not because those should never be done or they can't be done, but it rather like essentially let's put a stake in the ground and show people what's possible, right? And then you can build off of it. And so to be able to build off of it means there's gonna be much more deeper discussions around not just what these things mean, but like how do we accurately code them? And so, right, there might be there's schools who are implementing online learning very differently, right? Some might have, there's essentially 150 kids in the class, but they're kind of learning at their own pace, and they might check in with a teacher 1 day a week. And so from the teacher perspective, I'm meeting kind of with 5 separate sections. But as far as the system is concerned, I'm teaching 150 kids. Another online school isn't doing it that way. It really is like a teacher to 15 kids. And so when you start to bring in these very different ways that things are being handled, it becomes like, all right, well, should these be coded the same way? Should these be coded differently? So they're just, it's just the nature of the beast. So like, this is where we started. Because this is what's going to be most common across the state and help us include as much as possible. And if we do it well, people should have more questions. Right?
You'll find
Because
out.
if you're engaging with information, you should be asking yourself, why did this happen? What happened next? Did this have a role in it? Right. And so if we're doing this well, all the questions we're hearing should be happening. Right. If we're not doing it well, then you say, oh, thanks for that presentation. Goodbye. Right. Nobody has any questions. So it's just you're absolutely right. All those stories need to be told. But we also had to make a first version. And so it's not that those things can't be included or shouldn't be included. They're just going to take more discussions to get included.
Well, you've done your job well because we do have a lot of questions. So excellent work. We have a comment by member Else and then some closing remarks on this item by Superintendent Ebert.
Thank you very much. I will go very fast. Just thinking about how we would use it, like in local context, how school boards are going to communicate this type of information back, how school districts are going to communicate it back, and then if there's any factor that delineates or shows that, like if a very rural school, and like how far apart they're, I guess like distance between other schools, and then of course, if it accounts for multi-grade level classrooms, because I have several teachers teaching 3 grade levels in one classroom, and so what that would look like in pertaining to that.
So there's nothing that's going to tell you how far apart schools are in this. If you downloaded the school directory, there's probably the address in it. Like you could throw it into Google Maps if you wanted to do something. So you could do something like that. Regarding multi-grade level courses, because we're doing the averaging at the student level, it doesn't impact this. So let's, for example, say I'm teaching a special ed self-contained class with 6 kids, and one of them's a first grader, and 2 of them are second graders, and there's a 3rd grader and 2 5th graders or whatever. In the context of this, that would be considered one classroom, and the first grader has a class size experience of 6, and they're averaged in with the first graders. And the 2 second graders have a class size experience of 6, and they're averaged in with the second graders. And the 3rd grader has a class size experience of 6, and he's averaged in with the 3rd graders. So because we're doing the averaging at the student level, we can do things like that isn't available when averaging at the class level. That makes sense.
Yes, just potentially if there could just be some type of denote that would like just make somebody aware if it's a rural school or multi-grade levels, because it really is a big difference. Even if you only have 10 kids, if you're teaching 3 grade levels, that's a much different responsibility load versus if you are teaching one classroom of even 20 kids of 1 grade level.
Yep.
So
So in that instance where we had the table down below and it has the teacher's name and the course name, in my example, in the course name, it'll say essentially first grade, second grade, third grade. It'll show that sections are combined.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Into the Ebert.
Thank you. First comment is transparency. Very thankful for, we accept public dollars. And the public needs to know what is happening in our classrooms. And so the transparency behind all of this provides us the opportunity, for the last 6 years, I sit in front of the legislature and they want to know specific answers. And because we didn't have systems that were linked before, I either could not give them an answer or I would spend, my team would spend hundreds of hours to try to find the answer so they could make a decision.
Because it's
So
how
the
they allocate the money.
transparency and the ease of use to be able to get information more quickly and accurate, timely is important. The second piece, I love the conversation around basically what it's around is data literacy, right? What does the data tell us and what questions do we need to ask even ourselves as we move forward? Why does one classroom have 33 and the other classroom has 22? There are reasons. Administrators, are very involved with their scheduling. The counselors are extremely involved. There is a reason.
Everybody's
And here
getting paid.
too, again, the public, I'm a parent. I would like to know why. And I have a right to ask those questions and to understand, once that communication happens between the family and the principal or the family and the classroom teacher, we're building bonds, we're making connections, we're building the understanding beyond what we hear and we experience, and maybe even some of us use it sometimes. Well, when I was in school, right, that's the typical piece that comes out. When I was in school, well, none of us have been in the classrooms that are of today. And so we need to look at what's transpiring in the classroom of today and have that understanding and then support and lift up. And then just a massive amount of gratitude to Data Insight Partners, to our ADAM team at the Nevada Department of Education, to all of our directors who this project has been going on for 2 years. All of our educators, all of the individual school districts, we did not realize how misaligned across our state our coding was for specific classrooms.
Misaligned.
We made an assumption that they were all aligned because we go in there, every class has a code. But when we started doing this project and really digging in, the data people at the school districts found the differentiation of, well, no, we've been using this code for X and we've been using this code for Y. So across the entire state, this has been a lift to make sure that we are consistently capturing all of our students, our coursework, the number of teachers, the transparency. I'm not going to sit here and say it's perfect. This is the launch of our first version to making sure that we can celebrate and give accurate information timely. The fact that we have 1,200 more teachers in classrooms. I love that we have substitutes that are willing to go into our classrooms. The fact that we have 1,200 more licensed educators that are serving our students. And, I'm going to go ahead and say it. There is a correlation with the funding that was made available by our legislature, signed off by the governor, and then implemented by our school district superintendents and leaders. It is a great win. And I'm excited about it and very thankful to everyone that has participated and thankful in advance for those of you that will help us enhance this in the future.
Thank you, Nathan, for being here with us today. We look forward to the rollout of this and hearing how successful everyone finds it to be. So thank you. All right, we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 10. And if we could have our representatives from Clark County School District please come up. We are going to take a 3-minute bio break as you get established. So we will come back at 12:05. Thank you.
Fiscal year compliance report. What a joke. We're taking a break. Okay, I'm gonna take a break too. Being on a break.
It's that the state and NDE couldn't meet without districts and schools meeting those, but that we could not force districts or schools to meet. So I think I just have those same concerns. I don't know if I'm just saying that to put those things on the record, but I think that it's important that perhaps we look back at those same concerns from last year. Perhaps we ask that as we move forward, those concerns are looked at for the future, because I believe that we are looking at the same concerns again, and we have not ever addressed those things.
They never addressed.
Thank you, Member Hughes. Excuse me, Member Orr. You both had a similar concern there. Yes, and we can definitely add that to the conversation when we're talking about this at the future agenda item meeting when that happens. But what I would ask you is, what solutions do you have for making those changes that you suggest? Don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you have some, please welcome them there. You know, you can say them now, but if not, please. I think as a board, we really need to, if we have the vision for what we see we want, we need to offer suggestions on how to get there and be active participants in making that change. So if you have any solutions now, please go ahead and share. Otherwise, we can circle back later. So I think that we'll need to ask NDE to work with us for the future to develop a committee, or work with the board in the future to actually include us in creating this ahead of time, include board members in the creation of the STIP ahead of bringing it to us in an almost fully fleshed out version. So I would ask that that's done in advance next time, and I'm happy to move forward with this otherwise, but I do think that I would like these notes put on the record for now. Thank you. Thank you, Member Orr. We have a comment from Superintendent Ebert, and then we have additional board members with questions. Superintendent Ebert, for the record. So one of the items that you had mentioned, Member Orr, was specifically in our previous goals where we had listed targets that the Department of Education was not in control of meeting. And so so we did listen to you, and you will find that in this, unless you find it in this document, it is not meant to be. But this document is, as noted by other members of the board, really different than the prior STIP, in that there were indicators, number one, that did not, that the Department of Education cannot or should not be held accountable to, right? It is, as you mentioned earlier, the supports. And so that's where you'll see a huge shift in the frame,
And then also too, by several members of the board, want to circle back. We have been extremely inclusive of teachers, students, all on page 4. Those are the various groups that have been involved. But, you know, an exhaustive, is every single citizen
Haha, she's a
aware of
joke.
this
They
step? I
just
am-
ex-
No.
They're just
I really would
been
appreciate
giving.
and welcome and
They don't know what community engagement really is.
community. We will have the survey that will go out statewide.
It will go.
So that will be made available as well. We will take the comments that have, or suggestions, solutions that have been offered.
Because you don't know what the fuck to do.
And work it.
Don't follow any federal regulations.
Comments and solutions that have been offered is we have read it, reread, and it keeps evolving. Some of those same things that you have mentioned. So it's like, yes, we thought the same thing. So thank you for continuing to bring that forward. And in this iterative process, we will go back to those same groups, because I think what's very important in any process is that, you know, it's not just a checkbox and saying, oh, I went to the teacher advisory group and I met with them. But it is a loop, right? Okay, we met with you. Now we've captured your work in this document, but did we capture it as you intended? Because maybe there was something that was missed in the translation, or even as and I'm using the teacher group as an example, or over the last couple of months, you've had time to think more deeply about it.
Okay,
And
we
maybe that's what you mentioned 3 months ago. I would
Nine.
like to go deeper.
The board
So
will now receive presentation.
a working draft
from the
as
county
we did. We will make sure that we work with each board member.
Superintendent of community partnership
Specifically, if you would
relations
like to have
and chief strategy
community,
officer.
events
Nicole
meeting, we will be there
The
to
presentation will
support.
update on the reorganization plan
Yes,
dated
we
September
welcome
25th.
leadership.
Board.
Board
It will
to make
include
this
a review of
the
items
most
identified as
documents at this moment
and
in
a
time,
detailed
given the
overview
context that we
of all
have. So
CCSD
we
and
will
teaching
student
students. Proceed when ready.
Thank you, Superintendent
Thank
Eber,
you.
for that clarification and the
For the
offer.
record, I think
We
we
have
have
a
a deck of ours that is
report.
2 significant slides
And
deep.
so I'm happy we're
You wanna
talking
run it?
about this
Great.
community input.
Also attached, as
we
reference,
do have
is a report
number of,
to which we will be
items,
speaking. It is a,
Coming up.
if you go ahead and advance to the next slide.
At community input.
The reorganization compliance
Young
report is
adults
prepared
students.
in compliance with the requirement of
They would.
the Clark County School
appreciate
District
an
regulation,
opportunity
which
to
requires us to create an annual
contribute to
compliance
definitions of what we're
report
talking
of the
about. So, for
implementation of
example,
NRS
frameworks
380G
that were mentioned,
and aligns
that
state
were
and
this
district
is
regulations.
model here. We have
That
have the
report
dotted
includes,
line.
as you can see on this slide
There
here,
were some items.
the actual compliance analysis
involve
itself.
more
There's also a timeline of actions
And
that
so
are
with
required.
any of the framework
Any notices of non-compliance, corrective action plans,
needed, it would
communication
be
summary,
to,
organizational team meeting materials
uh,
collection, which is another
create
requirement
this
of board
logical
regulation, the district regulation, I should say.
alluding to.
And then finally, a summary of any retaliation, reprisal
Creating
complaints,
this logical-
compliance dispute claims, and compliance recommendations that were received by the district. This report reflects fiscal year, fiscal year 2024, so between July 1, 2023 and the end of June.
How can this be actualized?
So on the next slide, I have to summarize for you the 2 areas that we found for that school year that we were not in
And so
compliance.
If we are
The
to
first
make
is
sure that
the regulation of
understanding
the
same
state
definitions,
board, which
at
is
least,
still not
and
codified in
then
NAC.
moving forward.
A few years ago, the
on
board
definition
adopted R 063-22,
model, so that those
partly which requires that the district provide a report twice a year
the next step.
with information related to vacancies for which a substitute teacher was selected. We have not submitted those reports. I've not been able to compile the data appropriately. So have not been in compliance with that requirement and regulation. The second area of compliance is with an area required by our own district regulation relating to collecting information from principals and bargaining groups related to the election of team members.
and providing and collecting
information.
reports
And
on
then
training for
if we
principals and
could,
team members.
Getting some of
In
that
alignment with the
accountability input at
requirements
some point
in the NAC
so that it's
training
all
for
there.
in that
How
case,
everything has changed, how the measuring of students
information
success
from
outcomes has changed
the
over the
bargaining
past
group
several
was
decades.
requested.
Just to look at, what
The
is
training
missing
materials were
in the past.
provided.
And then,
but our first attempt at
I'd like to
collecting the
use
certification was insufficient, so we revised
the
all
early process and at the
for this
finalized
year. So,
version.
when
for
we
the
talk
past
about
several years, that
what
is
we do in make corrections to these learning of non-compliance, the first one has been by far the most
I think
difficult.
we could get some sort of
And with some recent leadership and
definitions.
the human resources team in our
was
district,
requesting that we
we've
could
taken a
again
fresh
have a
look at
conversation
that
about
requirement and the
different
systems that
terms,
we need to
laws, ways
adjust.
that. Otherwise, you're not having a
Systems, both
conversation of
computer
what's
and human
assuming
systems that we need to adjust
intent
so
of
that we're
different
collecting the data
words.
that's necessary.
I think that's where we would
And,
pause
just
and then
as early as this
the
week,
board just
I
reviewing
received,
that
information
data,
from the subcommittee kind of working on
also
that
have data
in
too.
this
And
report.
then plan some sort
And the
of
process that precedes the report.
true
And that's
community
that,
input, but it's really hard to ask you to come out
we should be able to
and
begin collecting
give
data
input on something
for
that
report.
they can't understand. That's too
The second
just all over the place in a way.
also
We need to be able to
I've
put
been
this
able
together
to
really
add a
clearly
very
and
valuable member to my team.
is
Primary responsibilities is to manage the collection,
I've done
monitoring the collection of
CCSD. I have a
information
few other
regarding
people,
SOPs.
commissioner.
So he works in consultation with school supervisor regions to make sure that the information is
I
coming
know
in.
we don't have a budget.
We should be in
resources,
compliance with
but,
that.
I'm telling you, with putting too much extra work on teachers,
That's the beginning.
there's teachers out there that would
And the
be
end of the slide deck
happy
as well.
to help
So
us
I
get this
presume there are a
done.
few questions.
And if you need to get
happy
something
respond
together in a way that
Thank you
is
very much.
bite-sizable and easily understood.
Thank you for
Get yourself a teacher coach because they'll have like a color-coded spreadsheet in like 2 seconds. Trust me, I know this. And so I'm happy to help.
Thank you all.
To organize that information.
So
and then
I guess
again, after
larger
we
question I have
discuss
was just
again
have a
to
perspective
help,
on it's sort of a
organize events and
exact report.
put some
I'm curious, one thing
we'll just do some guilt trips to some teachers here and get them involved in that. And they can
legislature
act as our
is sort of a big picture
supporters as we
evaluation.
are. And if they want to put more stuff on.
Like, so there's like a difference
Plate.
between
That's
did we
just a suggestion.
comply with the steps and did it
Solution.
actually change the experience for kids?
Thank you so much.
Families? And I don't know, you all know, maybe, you know, but like, what is the evaluative process or tool are you
this next
time
moves forward to
and
gather some data engagement,
questions because
collect some of that feedback, and I encourage all other members of the board as well. If you'd like to participate in that work, please reach out to.
What is the evaluative stance for
Either
the
Lisa.
There is a separate
Okay.
report that was
So with
temporarily mistakenly attached to this agenda. Actually,
We are
we submitted another report
anything this time for
annually,
approving it going forward.
of which includes
Okay.
some description of the experience with the implementation of the reorganization and recommendations for
Move forward
legislation in the
with
future.
Statewide plan for the
A
improvement of
common
people.
theme
Do I
in
need
those reports
to-
that we've repeated time and time again is the discussion around
That is
the
clear. Thank you.
reported
There's that.
equity stance that the reorganization partially was intended to
Hi.
take. And unfortunately, I think it's made it worse in some cases. Primarily, this centers around conversations relating to principals' authority to manage their budgets and hire their staff.
And the principals have no authority to
Which
do
is
that.
great. Principals do exactly what anybody should do in their position. They staff up their schools to the best of their ability. And they manage the human capital for their individual schools. However, the district has a responsibility to provide all students in Clark County with an equal
Access.
educational opportunity. In fact, that's written into the PCFP law, right?
Thank you.
But we do not have the ability to ensure that
Adequacy.
educators are distributed equitably across schools. So while the conversation when the reorg was being developed was about dollars following the students. And I remember literally putting a slide with a kid with a backpack with dollars in it. I'm saying, yes, the dollars follow the student, the dollars follow the student, but you can't put dollars in a kid's pocket and magically make them read. And so the stance that I've been taking over the last few years is that the unit of equity is really not, it's really not the dollar. The dollar is not the unit of equity. The unit of equity is the teacher. We all know that the teacher is the number one impact to students' education. And without the ability to equitably distribute teachers, we lose the ability to equitably distribute the opportunity for learning for our kids. So that's been an ongoing challenge for us since the implementation of the reorg. There are other issues that are kind of less impactful, but maybe more irritating from an operational standpoint. Specifically with the work we've been doing, changing the way we implement the PCFP and some of the overlap between NRS 3887
School-wide.
and 3883 are creating, now that we're taking a really close look at it, are creating some operational kind of
Nightmares.
ridiculousness, I guess, for lack of
Nightmares.
I don't think anybody intended that. We certainly will be including on our next version of that other October 1 report. Other than that, I think some of the really bright spots in the reorganization of one, the SOTs. That was a challenge at first, but I really think has normalized a kind of broad participation in not only decision making, because that sounds authoritative, but just understanding what's going on in a school and normalizing considering multiple perspectives when we're making decisions about kids. So I think that's a good thing. There are certainly some challenges with the recent changes with SOTs in that there's some conflict between being responsible for the outcomes of schools and yet not fully having the authority to decide who leads those schools and not fully having the authority to determine the investment of resources for schools. So there are some challenges there where sometimes we feel like our hands are tied.
But they're not.
Granted, sometimes there are other ways we can work to around those things, but they're just more challenging than they need to be, and certainly more challenging than they are in other districts.
Then you've made them.
For the record, Brenda Larson Mitchell. Member Hughes, if I could add on to that, please. As Ms. Kowal-Paul mentioned, our principals are doing what they need to do to make sure that they're meeting the needs of their schools. So if it's hiring additional learning strategists or an extra third grade teacher,
Whatever it is,
in on what needs to happen in their classrooms. But just roughly, we have approximately 700 classroom vacancies right now, which is about 4%. And last one I touched.
It matters where the vacancies are, boo.
About 570 of those vacancies are in our Title I schools. So sometimes when our schools in suburbia offer, additional classroom vacancies to maybe reduce class size in third grade or fourth grade, they tend to get those teachers more than we do in the urban core. I'll also reiterate to what Ms. Kowal-Paul mentioned about, superintendents are held accountable for student outcomes. Based on
and how is that happening?
Does have the ability with a 75% vote or more to overturn the superintendent's decision on the principal hire. Thank you.
What a joke. You're not still obligated.
Thank you. Any other questions? Member Ford. Thank you. I was super confused today about this because it did.
Yeah, I was super confused, Danielle.
One for the governor, and then I highlighted the whole thing and wrote a bunch of questions about it.
Of course you did. You made it to another board.
A sense, but I guess my question first is is this the first original document something we can talk about, or should we be addressing? Because there are some things that are being requested by CCSD that I guess would come to this board or be of pertinence to this board, some changes. Or can we talk about this?
Can we talk about this? I don't know.
Deputy Superintendent Gardner, are you asking about the portion they did not include in their presentation today that was originally sent?
Yeah, I have it in my notes, but I don't know if it's still attached to the agenda or not in the support materials or not.
For the record, we'd be happy to continue the conversation. We did not submit that report in any way, shape, or form. So that was submitted by NDE without our knowledge, and we found that report yesterday.
You found it yesterday. Yesterday you found it.
And that's the one that's like prepared for, because it says superintendent of public instruction. So it was prepared for the governor and Superintendent Eber. It just wasn't intended to be the reference materials for this item. Is that correct?
Kelly Cole, Paul, for the record, that's correct.
Okay. I'll just, this is probably a good thing for us to start thinking about. A lot of the things that are in here, obviously we'll be, dealing with this with the legislature, are a lot of the requests from CCSD about, some control over
Local
educator
control.
placement
And she's silly.
things like that. I think a lot of them have to do with the HCM system. Is there and if the, that's, I think we're now at like 20 million or so investment into that HCM system. And so
AGM system.
I was talking to Ms. Snyder about this recently, but it's my understanding that like principals can't just view all of the open or all the teachers that are looking for, all the music teachers, for instance, and say, I need a music teacher. They have to then submit separately an opening and application and hope that people apply for that and somehow see it. So there's a lot of things that I feel like CCSD still needs to fix before, like with the HCM system, before requesting changes to it. I guess I had some more questions, but if that's not the whole.
This is Deputy Attorney David Gardner. As long as we stay within the agenda item, which is regarding the compliance report, we're fine.
Okay.
If you have questions outside of that, which would be anything in compliance with 38G, that's fine. If we want to go outside of that, we'd have to agendize it. So we'd have, agenda item today, but solely to mention that a new agenda item that we'll do in the future.
I guess I'll just point out without talking about it. At item 5, it in blue, it has like recommendations for changes in legislation. That is, my question is like, what are some of the solutions? Remember, just so that we can all follow along with you, would you mind which document exactly? It's the report one. It's the September 25th. Yeah, so this is page 4 or 5, and you don't have to talk about it, but like if you guys want to write that down on your notes.
Daniel Ford is still at the game. She's at the table.
What's CCSD proposing? Because I believe it's going to come to us in the future. We're going to have to discuss. But I don't want to like violate open meeting law or anything like that.
Superintendent Ebert, for the record, following Dad Gardner's guidance about not specifically the document, but I think your question is similar to what Member Hughes was saying in that, and it is NRS 388G, like what is it within that law, which we can talk about, correct, that you would recommend to enhance the school experience?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm trying to find out.
Kelly Cole, Paul, for the record. To be honest, I feel a little bit of a disadvantage because the report was submitted in October, and I did not prepare to speak to that report. So
she feels at a disadvantage.
Some grace. I'd be happy to come back at another time to discuss what we put in that report, but it's been ages.
It's been ages. It's been ages.
October 1st. So I appreciate your that you've done the work, but I have not for that.
No, for sure. And I'll just say that the three of you sitting here I'm not going to group in this statement that I'm about to say, but in my experience with CCSD and previous administration, it was nobody would know this if you weren't like in the know of like different meetings, but it was very open and general consensus with admin that we're just not going to follow the reorg because it doesn't make sense. And
that's why we're not going to follow the reorg because it didn't make sense.
Well, we don't think it makes sense either, actually, but we can't prove that to the legislature without actually doing it. We can't get it changed unless we actually do it. So, I
stole the state sees CCSD and they refused to coyote it.
We have had a lot of time to really implement the reorg, and it probably wouldn't have taken this much time if it was just done.
We just chose not to follow the federal regulations. Isn't that amazing?
It's not successful or successful. It just literally hasn't hasn't been done correctly. So, but I feel like both boards are
SB 496.
could easily work together to figure out how to get it done. And this,
Item 13 under the reorg.
I personally think there's a lot of things wrong with it, but again, you can't make a actual arguments against something without having
They
data to
can't
provide.
push
That's where I am.
the lack of regulations that were
I
implemented.
just want to state
No
for the record that
oversight.
while that may have been a
Understand.
stated opinion of some in the district, that is not the opinion of the district or any of us sitting here.
Oh, yeah, it's not the opinion of the district. Well, it is what your data say.
Member Hudson, for the record, just a quick question or suggestion. I don't know what is going to follow. When it comes to the SOT teams and you guys are not being compliant when it comes to the election or the training materials, have you guys thought about like
Following another state's process.
training
Yeah.
or staff development days to make sure annually, like sometimes we get trainings that's like redundant or unnecessary.
But they have to happen.
It's like something that's in law forefront that we should be probably getting trained annually.
Yeah, that's
especially
right.
When
She right.
leadership change within the school.
Tamika Hudson.
Just making sure that those
Let
materials
me
stay
just
stated.
screenshot
Have you guys thought about
So,
like revamping our
Tamara Hudson.
instead
I'll
of,
have
like,
to send her the
having
school
videos
board manual.
or having to understand that sometimes staff development days, I remember we used to like flunk where you would go to the district for some type of training and then we'll return back to our school for another. Like, have you thought about it so you would be in compliance and everyone would get the same training and not like, oh, I'm gonna train my assistant superintendents or I'm gonna train my
Single
principals
plan
and
for
they
student
pick
achievement.
what they want to give back to their staff. So it came from the district. So have you guys thought about like revamping the way the PED is given to us?
Kelly Paul for the record. Thank you for the question. A couple of layers here. Number one, I want to clarify that the thing that we are not in compliance with is not provide training to the SOTs. The training has been provided. It's also updated annually and reviewed and approved by the
Single
Department
plan
of
for
Education.
student achievement.
So it stays updated. The thing that we found ourselves to be out of compliance with is our board's requirement that we monitor and track how and when principals provided that training to the SOTs. We received some response. We did not receive 100% of schools, and therefore I can't put not in compliance. Now we have someone physically monitoring, and if we don't get a response, they get a phone call, right? So we'll be in compliance with that. The overlap with professional development days, though, is a conversation that takes us beyond the implementation of the reorganization and into what is our core business, and our core business is instruction. And so certainly our professional development days are focused on instruction.
Prove it.
For professional learning.
Where's your data, boo?
Precious.
You got no data, boo.
While we could take that into consideration for the best implementation of reorg training, absolutely. It's also the best implementation of literacy training. And so we would have to balance out kind of a finite amount of time and opportunity for
Here's
people.
California's plan.
But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Ain't got no plan.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. If another one comes to you, just let me know. Okay. I have a question, and thank you so much for bringing up the point that money is a factor, but it's the teacher that is the biggest factor in the education of a student. I'm curious, and as the money's coming down and it gets to the school level and the SOTs have their budget decisions to make, can you give us just a general sense? So when the budgets were first projected in January versus
how they support their kindergartners. I want to know.
In September,
the black
the teacher salary.
know.
How were they different? Did those projections align? Were the schools like the average salaries were less, higher?
Thank you, Member Dockweiler. So you're referring to fall 2024.
Yes, and the teacher raises that were awarded.
We are working really hard on next week, January 15th.
Bet you are.
And we've had, according, as Member Ford mentioned, fixing. We're doing a lot of fixing. And we're working really hard on that. So last September, when budgets came out, we were approximately short in about $5,700 in the estimation of a licensed professional. So in January,
and a highly qualified teacher.
We did estimate, about.
That's why you got all them
8%
temporary teachers
increase
working
in
over there.
salaries Licensed.
All them
That would
temporary
be
teachers with no skills working with them highly needs students.
But we know that, the COLA was 8% in of itself. So then we were short step advancements and column advancements.
For highly qualified. So you got your teachers who have the skills working where they want to work.
So I'm just curious. How, I don't know, like
Don't be
700 still
curious.
costs us like 8,000.
Mhm.
I know you. don't know.
Temporary teachers working with high need students. Temporary teachers working with
For the
high
particular
need
switch, are you
students.
asking for what the average
Mhm.
salary then was?
Right, what the actual increase was to schools versus what was projected. Like if the 5,700 was or that was what was the actual.
We were short.
Yeah.
We were short 5,700, so the average salary came out to about 120,000.
Okay, gotcha.
That too. She said that too. Okay, that too. She didn't want
I'm
to
looking for
admit to it, but she wanted to say it. That too.
So back to on the same topic then. So how with SB 231, and it ended up raising the average teacher salary in districts. So that would be the average salary now is 120.
You gave everybody some raises, boo,
Really
and
cool.
you didn't have nowhere to get that raise money from.
No, not exactly.
No. And y'all gave all you people some
Average
raises.
Cost to school budgets of the salaries of teachers who were in positions being charged.
Highly
the average
qualified.
salary. So if the SB 231 funds were excluded from that number, because that
Highly qualified means highly qualified, working with those at-risk students, boo, that you ain't
Thank you
working
for that
with.
clarification. Very helpful. Member Ford?
Remember Ford? Danielle
I
Ford is still in the picture.
Comment. And this, I hope this doesn't come off wrong to you guys, but for our board to understand, I think we do understand, but put it out there. Like SATs.
Student
I think it's very important.
SOTs, student study
We
teams.
all agree that it's very important to empower the SOTs and to be in the compliance with the intent of that portion of the reorg.
Mhm.
And it's just that
You can't be in compliance that portion of the reorg if you ain't gonna address the needy students.
It's understandable.
Who was generating the money, boo?
That, it doesn't benefit CCSD admin ever. It doesn't, like, regardless, to support the empowerment of the SOTs, because it's like literally training the schools and the communities on how to take authority away from the district. So as the state board, it's just
The
like
state board had an obligation to train, and it's not about empowering local schools, because local schools still can't address the people in poverty. It's a state position.
We can't, do everything. I don't know what the solution is necessarily, but I think that the solution is going to probably have to come from this body to come up with some sort of training. So in August
from that body,
the CSD board
y'all
had a
train their
agenda
people
item. I can picture it. Brad was right
to
there.
follow the federal regulations and not create their own.
Conversation right now. And it was very heated because half of the board is at that time was very pro, like, let's do some training, let's teach the communities how to choose their principal, how to, what this means, how to understand the budget, it should all be cohesive. We were talking about how a lot of the SOTs are ran really well and how some schools don't have it going on at all. But then half of the board was very much like, they shouldn't really even be able to make those decisions,
because local control means local control, and the Title I dollars are for the children in poverty, and neglected and delinquent is for the homeless children, and special education is just real for all children with behavioral issues. Y'all got work to do.
Adversarial as it has been in the past.
It will be more adversarial. We coming, boo.
Take the reins a little bit and help produce material. I mean,
Danielle, we're coming. You never even had a conversation with me.
We could go find the SOTs that are working really well and duplicate what they're doing. But I just feel like we have to stop with that portion.
Nevada has an
CPS,
obligation
what are
to
you doing to train your SOTs? Because
To
we
do
just
what?
really don't have
to address the disproportionality
That's all.
in America as they have caused this. Go
Thank you,
ahead,
member.
Daniel. Yeah, she
Yeah,
has to be nice to her.
Not to prolong
Be
this.
nice.
One idea that I don't know if y'all, it'd probably be a logistical nightmare, but it does strike
Kim
me that
Hughes.
in the way we operate, it's compliance of the district, but really the way the construct of the district is like a federation of schools. And so I do want.
Yes, you have the ability to be a district because you work together.
The NDE, because you all are collecting a bunch of information, and it's the level of oversight is different in the reorg, and so it does make me wonder.
That's
about,
right.
should we rethink who's actually responsible
That's right.
for submitting these things, so that again, you all potentially aren't having to just spend all your days and hours just collecting data from schools. Like if they're running their school effectively, they should be doing that, and then that's an issue, So
Accountability is just everything.
language is written as the district, but it feels like a little bit of a disconnect there in how we're
It
reporting.
is a disconnect what the reorg actually brought to Clark County. Member husbands.
Superintendent Ebert.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Here.
As the state has an obligation for oversight.
With the other materials and the questions that were asked, I think it'd be appropriate to bring the item back to a question or comment that was made earlier. There is the process that if the district is not in compliance with NRS 388G, then the state superintendent would ask them for a compliance, right? Corrective action plan. So if there is a specific area.
Where's the corrective action plan? You supposed to had that, boo.
Themselves
That's you.
find a specific area, and if it would be helpful to go through that process. I'm a true believer in those.
She a true believer in the process.
Are those that are best positioned to solve it. And sometimes it's just providing that additional support, transparency, conversation to get to that. But there is a process in place now. This board did put in place the exact process for a corrective action plan when the district is not in place. And that happened 2 years ago.
Sure did. 2 years ago. Then go.
Thank you, Superintendent Ebert. I have one last question surrounding SOT's ability to use their budget. And the part of this is training them how to use their budgets and training them to understand what is a service level agreement, what services can be contracted outside of the service agreement. Has training been provided on that, or could you explain to us what the process is, and do SOTs need to just take those agreements, and what training's been provided to them for alternatives?
Kelly Cole, Paul, for the record.
Single plan for
student. SOT does not use the budget. The principal is the leader of the school. The principal is responsible for preparing and submitting and implementing the budget. The SOT, for the very first time this last go around, has the authority to approve or disapprove the budget that the principal develops and submits. So
you got to be able to measure that shit, but
professional learning that would perpetuate a misunderstanding of the authority of the SOT. If we were to provide training to the SOT on how to engage with contractors or things like that, that would be outside of their scope, and so is not included in the training for the SOTs. There is an opportunity, however, for some enhancement of the training that's provided to the principals and the SOTs, especially as a result of this budget work we've been doing over the last few weeks, that I think would benefit both our principals and our SOT members, that we certainly will be looking at developing once we get through this January 15th next week, maybe get settled in the rest of our world for a little bit. So yeah, I do think there's an opportunity for enhanced training. It wouldn't necessarily fit within the training of the reorganization itself, but by all means would benefit the SOT and their ability to carry out their responsibilities that are in 380G.
That would be incredible. Thank you for that. I've spoken with several school leaders and the SOT members who seem very confused as to their role and also what services can be contracted out, what services the district provides. And so I think clarification on that would be very helpful for all parties. Thank you. Member Hudson agrees. Thank you. Okay, well, I love the idea of bringing, first of all, during public comment, it was suggested that the AB 469 subcommittee be reconvened. I think this is a great opportunity to bring that back because it sounds like there's a lot of different questions and opportunities for continued engagement and moving, just making sure everybody's on the same page, moving the work forward. So we so appreciate your time and being here. We know we held you up a bit, maybe more than a bit, but we appreciate your patience and grace. Thank you. Now we will move on to agenda item 11. And at this time, AJ Fueling, the superintendent of the Carson City School District and secretary treasurer of the Nevada Association of School Superintendents, will present the INVEST plan. The strategic initiative focuses on enhancing funding, fostering innovation, implementing meaningful accountability measures, prioritizing mental health investments, and creating secure learning environments. Superintendent Fueling, please proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, President Dockweiler and members. Very happy to be here today. Thank you for allowing us, the Nevada Association of School Superintendents, to present. The INVEST document is something that has become a standard affair for NAS, Nevada Association of School Superintendents, as we go into legislative sessions to put together what we call a one-pager, and really it's a two-pager because it's two-sided, of information that we feel that our legislators need to know as we go into advocating for our students in the state. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So thank you, and I apologize. I know we have some new members, and welcome. Thank you so much for taking this step to represent the kids of Nevada and advocating for them. And as always, thank you for your service, energy, and commitment to those kids and to the state, and partnering with NAS and giving us this time to present on this topic. Next slide. So we strongly believe in public education. We believe public education changes lives. It's foundational to society's progress, that we have to work together to transform public education. Deep learning doesn't look the same for each student, and our educators show their commitment each and every day in every school in this state. And I'll take a minute. Some of you have seen this information before, but again, I know we have some new folks, and the way this presentation is set up, there's 5 kind of main points to the INVEST document, and there's a little bit of supporting information before getting to each one. So one of the initial points is going to be about funding, and so this lays out a little bit of information on funding for K-12 education in Nevada. So in 2022, you have what per pupil funding was for Nevada there at that top line, just over $10,000 per student. Below that, you have what the national average was at that time, which is about $15,500 per student. And the third line is the subject matter expert recommended APA. APA is Augenblick Pelican Associates. Some years ago, last time was in 2018, I believe. This group did a report to look at, really it's looking at, given all of the requirements of education in the state of Nevada, all of the all the mandates we must meet, all the things that we must do.
You're right. You must.
What it actually cost to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so going through all of that and through a lengthy process, they developed a report to say, here's what it costs to do what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. And the state's not putting their fair share?
2022 is about $15,700 per student, so a little bit more than the national average. Below that, getting we know the number for Nevada now is about 13,300, which is an enormous increase over.
Enormous.
And then you have the national average, and again, that APA recommended number. We don't actually know the national average just yet. It's the 2022 number adjusted for inflation going forward. So that it's kind of an estimate, but the idea being that we have definitely made progress, but we're probably not quite where we need to be. And we know as far as the APA number, we know we're not where we need to be.
You know you're not where you need to be. You just know it. Look at Nevada. Look at California over there by itself.
The slide, I'll make it quick.
You can't even see
California. A sense of nationally what funding looks like. The darker the state, the higher the level of funding. And so you notice Nevada is
in the semi.
So there's still work to be done in terms of moving us towards that national average and ultimately that recommended amount.
See where Nevada is.
So providing for optimal funding is priority one. To continue the increases that we have seen, we are very, very, very grateful for what happened in the last session.
They're so grateful for what happened in the last session.
Since 1982. But
whose problem is that?
That time and this time, really the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s.
2010s, 2011s, 2012s.
On the funding side. So we're working on making up for 30 years, but very excited to have that opportunity. The third point I think is really important, and for those of you who are not as familiar with the PCFP, which is the way that funding is effectively, it's a model that distributes funding to districts and charter schools in the state. Part of that is there's a different weighted amount of funding for students if they have certain needs.
That's right. If they have certain needs.
Student, if you are an English learner, if you are considered at risk.
Or neglect. That's how come they have that problem with neglected and delinquent.
There's extra funds that
the federal government
with each one of those students. However, under the current setup,
he called it.
Districts and charter schools only receive funding for it's effectively the weight that is the highest. So the example I would use is if I have a special education student,
that's what all that money is special ed. You got to explain it.
Consider at risk. A district or charter school would only receive funding for their special education services. But there wouldn't be that weighted funding coming for their English learning needs or their to support them as an at-risk student. And I would argue that a student with all three of those categories needs a whole lot more services.
He gonna argue that point.
Frankly, they cost they cost more money to provide all those services. So seeing that,
quite frankly,
scenario where all of those needs would be represented to offer the right level of support to those kids would be ideal.
Discover learner-centered what?
The next piece
is all about acting rather than being acted upon, shaping rather than being shaped, and making responsive decisions, choices rather than accepting those determined by other. And he has to accept that the federal government has already
education to come in Nevada.
Determined what the game looks like.
This quote, I think, sums up what we would love to see. It's about acting rather than being upon, shaping rather than being shaped, and making responsible decisions and choices rather than accepting those determined by others. We'd like to see learner-centered education in the future. if you've been a part of any of the work of the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, you've seen this slide many times. But the idea is that this is information from 2024, or a survey from 23 that was shared in 24 about the globally the top skills that kids we want, or I guess that they want workers to have, as far as the World Economic Forum is concerned. And so these are a lot of the things that I think we see going forward that have
Equal access, top core skills.
to leave school with, beyond what
He wants an analytical thinker, a creative thinker, resilience and flexibility, ability, motivated, or self-awareness, curiosity. He had a whole list.
So you hear the terms learner centered and future ready. I don't have to read through all of this, but ultimately we're worried about education being something that is focused on our kids and being holistic about their needs and where they're going. And future ready, there's a lot coming and a lot changing every single day. And so we want them to have the skills, the durable skills to be able to deal with that.
Deal with it.
So priority 2, creating this learner-centered, future-ready approach. The Department of Education, Superintendent Ebert led some great work in developing the Nevada Portrait of a Learner, which very much embodies these ideas that I previously spoke about, these durable skills that we want kids to have before they leave school. The idea of kids having innovative experiences, and I think point 3 and 5 are very related. We want kids to have in schools to feel free to offer innovative experiences for them. Incentivizing that, I think, would be a great way to go about it. However, not to be punished for trying out innovative ideas. And if we can eliminate any mandates that interfere with the flexibility to do those types of things. Slide.
So did you get it?
Getting into point 3, which is really about accountability. There's a lot of data. You all have seen a lot of data today.
Y'all seen a lot of data? We didn't get any data.
Really a big part of that is we are data rich in many ways.
Data rich.
Just making sure that are we really understanding what data is telling us? And I think that is an ongoing concern. And I think a really good example of that is chronic absenteeism, and is it actually telling us what we think it is? The world clearly has changed, and we know that our parents are much more likely to keep their kiddos home if they're feeling sick. It's kind of an impact of the post-COVID world. And then also, does it mean the same thing in terms of where we are going? If we really are moving towards a competency-based model of education, is seat time as important as it once was? Standardized tests, kind of in the same fashion. Do they measure what we think they do? And the question there is, if our students always giving their best effort here on those days when standardized tests are happening? And the example is given at a previous presentation, but one district asked their students after a test if they had given their best effort, and 35% responded that they did. And so if that's the case, are these the results of these tests actually telling us what we think that they are telling us?
State Department.
So through all these other ways that you potentially could look at the progress of students, the growth of students over time that are more holistic, and not just based on a test taken on a single day. One district along the same lines, looking at different ways that they are gauging student success, student progress. Again, far outside simply looking at the performance on a test. I'm trying to move this around quickly for you. I know this has been a long day already. So And an example here too, this is White Pine School District, our president, Addie Young, who couldn't be here today, just laying out many of the great things happening in various ways that students get to choose what they are interested in, choose what they are being a part of and what they're getting to learn. And all of it is very different, but all of it has great value, whether it's culinary or mentoring freshmen or being an athlete or participating in the arts. So the point to that then with priority 3 is to create one accountability system. I wanted to underline that, italicize it.
One accountability system.
1,000-point font. The PowerPoint will not allow for 1,000-point font, so I apologize. But that one accountability system is really critical, and it's really hard because of federal requirements and then ultimately what our values are as a state. But I think it's impossible to overemphasize how important your accountability system is. It drives everything. And so if you're having multiple accountability systems, it really ends up diluting the focus, the efforts. You're trying to do everything. There's so many plates you're trying to keep spinning. It can be really difficult to measure what matters. And I think that is always a question. And I'll jump to that little line there at the very bottom. Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted actually counts. And it's a really important thing. We like to be able to go to a number and look at a number and assume it's telling us so much because it's easy. And I think, unfortunately, education and humans are not easy. So there's a great quote that is from H.L. Mencken. I can't remember who he is. I just remember his name. But the quote was that every complex problem has a simple solution, and it's wrong. Education is a very complex industry, and so simple things don't always tell the entire story in terms of what we're trying to do. Modernize our approach to agency and flexibility with how they show their mastery, invite students and educators to co-design that process, and build on the innovative solutions concept and acing accountability. So if you're not familiar with it, after the last session and the huge infusion of funds, the governor came up with the acing accountability system. And one of the really interesting pieces of that was it allowed districts to come up with.
The governor came up with the solution.
Something that they could be held accountable to that was unique or important to their district. And I don't know that.
What would you like to keep?
It's really unique. I've never really heard of anything like that. So we were all very excited when that came out as an option. And every district has some different things. For Carson City School District, it was about work-based learning. We find that to be a really important part of what we're doing for our kids, and it's giving options to our kids from elementary on through high school. So that's something we're trying to grow ourselves. Slide. Well-being. If you are at all involved in schools, you know that mental health has become an incredibly difficult issue for our students and for our schools to offer support to our kids. We know that good mental health correlates with academic success, but the behavioral and mental health issues that our students are facing are just seeming to grow, and very much in this post-COVID world, it has become a real issue. Next slide. So looking to invest in mental health supports, dedicated funding for LCSWs, which is a licensed clinical social worker and related mental health professionals. Years ago, there used to be a dedicated stream to a funding stream to help pay for some of these costs. Some of that was diluted in the change to the new funding formula, but I think reestablishing that going forward would be incredibly helpful. I know for the Carson City School District where I am, we are trying to support, we have social workers in our schools, but mostly federal funding at this point, and that's going to be going away. So trying to come up with some more support to help with mental and behavioral health in our schools, continue training on the MTSS model. MTSS is multi-tiered systems of support. And basically the idea is that 80% of your kids will be successful with what you kind of offer traditionally to all of your students, the average everyday work of schools. But there's another 20% that are going to need some more help. And so what do those supports look like to help those kids academically, behaviorally, and those sorts of things? Next slide, please. And lastly, the last priority has to do with facilities. So many of our rural school districts don't have a tax base to generate enough funds for maintenance or construction. In the example here, in 1995, a new school cost $10 million. In 2025, the same school is estimated to cost $95 million. The tax base has not grown. And because of tax changes in the state that happened in 2005, the amount that can be raised off of property taxes to fund these things just are not what they need to be. The example I would use right here in Carson City, between 1988 and 1992, we built Empire Elementary, Fremont Elementary, and Mark Twain Elementary, all new schools. And we combined two large buildings that were Carson High School into one massive building that now houses about 2,300 kids. And we did that all within a 4-year period. Right now, we couldn't build a new school ourselves unless we waited probably about 15 years to accumulate enough bonding capacity to build a single school, let alone what we did 30 plus years ago. So ensuring funds to support districts. I hope everyone can hear that saw. It sounds really, there's some construction going on here. Ensuring that there are funds to help school districts design the environments for education. And I think that's just a reflection of the changes of what we want for kids in education, kind of back to priority 2, thinking about what we want the educational experience to be, but then also that there's just a reality of maintenance and operational requirements and capacity needs. We talked about class sizes in one of the previous presentations. That also can be a function of just the capacity of your buildings themselves and having space. Not every building has enough space to reduce those class sizes, even if the operational funds were available. Next slide. Those are pictures of a whole lot of good things happening across the state. I will stop at that. I tried to keep it as short as I could. I'm very thankful to be here. Thank you for your time today, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, any questions from the board? Member Keys, go for it.
I just wanted to say thank you for putting this together. It's a culmination of a lot of what I've heard from being here the past 2 years, and I hope that some of these priorities get implemented sooner rather than later. So just thank you so much for putting this all together, and thank you to NAS.
Thank you, Member Keys.
Thank you, Superintendent Fueling, for sharing this information today. My question is, how can the State Board of Education best support these efforts and these priorities moving forward?
Thank you, President Dockweiler. I think really what we have appreciated in the past is simply the support here of the State Board of Education in I guess officially agreeing with the priorities of this document. Ultimately, I think these are things that everyone who cares about K-12 education can get behind. And I think you're in a unique position because of so many of the items that you take here with this body and that you have to consider and make decisions upon, that your thoughts carry weight. And so if the body cares to officially put their support behind this document, that certainly helps our work going forward.
Thank you for that. That is something that the board could consider at a future meeting. We would have to agendize that for an action item, which we certainly can do. We can add that to our list and have that conversation at that time. Any questions or Member Hughes?
Member Hughes for the record. One question I wanted to dig into was around priority one, which I know funding is on everybody's mind. I'm curious, so I know my understanding is when a bunch of recommendations were sent from the Commission on School Funding to the legislature last time, that most of those, if not all, were not really implemented in terms of increased revenue generation, which is, I think would be required to pull this off. So I'm curious from your perspective and, the superintendent group, what's being done on the ground to rally communities who are ultimately going to, I think, we need to figure out some political cover for our policymakers, because I don't know that unless communities are
It doesn't exist.
That
no political cover.
Very excited about finding ways to increase revenue. So what's the ground game happening in communities to try to compel and convince folks that we should all get behind this? Because I feel like that will move our legislature more than just sending a wish list to them. If we can sort of rally communities around it.
Thank you, Member Hughes. So after the Commission on School Funding came out their original report 2 years ago, there was several sessions were held around the state to go through here what these recommendations were, what the impact would be. In the next session, the Commission on School Funding was tasked with many more things to take care of. And so the final report they just published, I believe it was right here at the end of November. And I think there's been a lot of focus on some of the other things that they have done. And part of it, with the huge infusion of cash that happened in the last session, I think to some extent, there was a feeling that, it's been taken care of. And so I think we have to go back and kind of digest through some of the information that has come out from that, because if you go through that report and it's like 500 pages, but you're
not meeting the needs of the students.
Really, it offers a menu of options to legislators to consider. But I think to your point,
not meeting the needs.
There needs to be a concerted effort to bring that back on the radar. As look, we have made huge progress thanks to the last legislature and the governor, but there is still an enormous amount of ground to cover.
Enormous amount of ground, he called it.
And that's, I think at the moment, there is not much of a ground game.
It's not a ground game what you guys have been doing.
It needs to be built. And
it's fraud. It's called supplanting.
Time.
It's called supplanting.
The types of things that are being talked about in that.
What you don't get to do
in that report are not easy things to change when you're especially when you're talking about property tax change.
It don't work. It doesn't work.
Thank you, Superintendent Fueling. I think that some good points are raised, having that groundwork done, having a shared vision, and having as many people as possible, supporting and being behind and sharing that message that these are our priorities and this is important to us. Member Braxton, and then we'll go to Member Orr.
No money is.
Thank you so much for your presentation. My question is, was there a cost analysis done on your licensed social workers and just the MTA?
Yeah, because the Department of Health and Human Services has a big role in this shit.
What would it cost to do that? And over
licensed social workers.
With the funds available be needed to jumpstart
Hello.
I believe so. Carson City School District, I believe, as of right now, is the only school district that has at least one social worker in every school. I believe that's correct. I know. So there has not been a formal analysis, but as I look at my phone right now and try to do some calculations really quickly, we are spending, I'll say about 1.5. It's a little less than that, but it's about 1.5 million, mostly through federal funds to maintain our social workers. Clark County School District is about 42 times larger than us, give or take. And so that would translate into about $63 million. So you throw in Show and everybody else, you're probably looking at about a $100 million item. With the basic idea of at least one social worker in every school, maybe some consideration for the size of schools. You may need some more, but it's not a.
It's a county issue,
not
state issue
to make that happen. But again, I think a lot has happened in the past years, and I could give you many.
It's how you use your Department of Health and Human Services, boo.
What they are going through and what they're seeing in their schools. That there is a real need for mental health services, not only in the schools, but even for those kids who are beyond, their needs are beyond what our schools really can serve. Other places that can offer them help in the state, and that is just
Medi-Cal, Medicaid,
lacking right now.
Medi money.
I know, for some of our students, the conversation isn't about, once it's apparent that really their behavioral health needs are beyond what we can do. There's nowhere else for them to go in Nevada. The conversation is, well, do they go to Texas or Missouri?
Do they go to Texas or Missouri? That's where they've been going.
Right to me. So,
hello, Texas or Missouri? Them babies.
I agree. Thank you.
Them babies.
Behavioral health, but there's also the resources needed for a neurodivergent community, and that is how that plays out in the behavioral health discussion. So this is clearly a huge priority. Thank you.
Clearly a huge priority.
Thank you for that question. That really feeds into a lot of the work that's a priority of this board, is supporting the whole child and the well-being of students. Back in 2020, this board passed recommended ratios for school-based mental health providers.
But they didn't give us no oversight.
For school counselors,
the oversight
agency, and 1 to 500 for school psychologists.
What y'all
those three ratios do align, or for those three professions do align with their national best practice.
National best practice.
And having one professional in one school oftentimes isn't even enough, because if you have a school with 1,000 students, you would need 4 counselors, 4 social workers, 2 school psychologists. So even just having one in a building right now full time is an amazing achievement. And it goes back to some of the other work that we've been prioritizing in terms of the dual credit and creating workforce pipeline programs to support not only educators in the classroom working in an instructional capacity, but also the educators working in the school-based mental health professions to support the whole child within the school setting. So a lot of this is an extension of our existing work. So definitely we want to keep that at the forefront. So thank you.
Keep it.
Member you had a question, and then Member Ford.
Member Ford.
Thank you.
Danielle's still in the building.
I really appreciate your presentation. I am so grateful for the relationship between the State Board and NAS. With Invest Priority 3, everything that you say.
Everything that you say.
Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted actually counts is always important to hear. I think with the ACing accountability framework, one of the things that I really appreciate is that innovative solutions framework. I really appreciate that you brought forward this idea that, the workplace or workforce development idea, if you could come forward with some regularity and share what the districts are doing with their innovative solutions, and bring forward that data and highlight those those stories and that data and make sure that we're looking at that as important as the other number crunching that we're doing all the time. I think if we're highlighting that and we're telling those stories and we're making that count as much as some of the other things, I just think we need to prioritize that as much as the other stories that we're telling. And I think that there's probably no organization better equipped to do that than yours. And so I would really appreciate us making sure that we have you doing that for us. So thank you.
Absolutely. I think ultimately we control the narrative, right? And so if we create that information in a way that can be digested and shared, you can see those successes that shows a lot of the good things happening in public education. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Member Orr. Member Ford?
Thank you. I don't want to take a whole lot of time, and I don't have any clear suggestions or even thoughts formed right now. I just wanted to say that I support this work entirely. I love the work and the idea of the portrait of a learner. This is all yes, but I'm very big into like I read a lot of like theoretical, conceptual, abstract stuff, not necessarily in the weeds of, you know, things that like an educator might read. And I follow a lot of these historians and education researchers. And so I'm just going to share a couple of thoughts that maybe we could just sit with or whatever. But, you know, a lot of districts are moving into a different mindset around education, what the purpose of education even is. I think that might be a great spot for us to talk about taking a few steps back and going back to that starting point, kind of like rethinking what is education even for? What should we be supporting with tax dollars when it comes to education? And I'm a very, very supportive of mental health services and child focused. Yes, I know, you know, that kids cannot learn when they are hungry, when they don't have shoes. So sometimes something is our problem, like it's not our responsibility, but it's our problem. We can't get kids the grades and, you know, the data that everybody wants if something that isn't necessarily education's responsibility isn't being met for that kid. So a lot of districts are really thinking about putting tax dollars towards the school buildings, and that becomes the community's building, not always just for education, and putting the cost of things towards the community and other entities. Like right now, you know, there's gonna be a big investment in mental health services. Does all of our mental health stuff have to come directly from the education budget, or could we tap into some of that? If we allowed, you know, access in a way that didn't harm our school buildings and it was in accordance with the principles, is there a way to provide wraparound services on weekends and, you know, breaks and in evenings in ways that the schools can really focus on just academics and keep those buildings as community resources? You know, a few people have mentioned, where's the money come from? I don't know if anyone's ever figured out the answer to this, but what happened to the additional 2% in the room tax that I think that was like 2012. I've attended a bunch of different forums, summits, Nevada stuff, and it's always mentioned, but I still have yet to hear an answer as to that investment that was supposed to be, you know, they went from 20% to 14% in an increase in room tax, and it just got put into the general fund and never put directly into education, which I believe would be to the tune now of like something like $10 billion or something crazy. That's, you know, something to look at, or at least get a clear answer to some of the, you know, leaders in education funding. I have notes and videos and stuff when I was learning all this stuff where they're talking about that, and I don't think anyone's it's almost like the elephant in the room that like no one's going to discuss that we were supposed to get all that money and we didn't. So that's one thing to look at, but I think that there's so many different things happening with, like, we should go forward with this. I'm all about it. It's great. But we should really have a kind of big picture
Community meeting
What is education
with everybody
for, and how can we
is involved.
bring it into being, like, if we wanted to more community focused, and we could reference some of these other
Yes, we
districts
all pay
that have
taxes. It's real.
us,
Bullshit.
switching into their mentality around
They're feeling
education.
our community and we need to over our own community.
Thank you, Member Ford. Those are very good thoughts, very good high level thinking points for us to consider. And Superintendent Fueling, it sounds like you have a lot of support from this board. We will circle back to see how we can best support the efforts of the INVEST plan and how we can support it moving forward. So thank you so much for your presentation today. We appreciate the information.
Thank you very much. And as was said to me yesterday, I hope you all thrive in 25.
You as well. Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 12, the board will hear a presentation from Shauna Jessen, Director of the Office of Teaching and Learning, Rachel Tillotson, Education Programs Professional in the Office of Teaching and Learning, and Lori Wilson, Contractor for the Office of Teaching and Learning. They will provide an update on the Nevada State Literacy Plan. And I see it's up and ready to go, so thank you.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, President Dockweller, Superintendent Ebert, members of the board. For the record, my name is Shauna Jessen, Director of Teaching and Learning, as had been mentioned. And we do have Rachel, who is an education programs professional for secondary English language arts and world languages, along with Lori Wilson, one of our dedicated contractors who is instrumental to our team, and they are in the north. So they've been critical in putting this work forward and are here to support this presentation today. I wanted to say, could you, next slide, please? I hope David can hear me and we're scooting along. Okay, so today we organized this brief presentation around purpose, people, process, and product. As we dive into this plan, we're going to look at it in these 4 ways. Next slide, please. So what is the state literacy plan? On this slide, we will define what the literacy state plan is and what it does. What it is a roadmap for our state's approach to improving literacy. What it does is provide a framework for using evidence-based practices to improve literacy outcomes. Really, its intent is to raise literacy skills for all ages from pre-kindergarten to grade 12, including our unique diverse population in our state. Next slide, please. So why update the plan? Well, it was clearly time for a refresh. The current plan was developed in 2015 and does not reflect how best practices have evolved over time. The Nevada State Legislature generously supported the implementation of the plan by allocating $498,400 for the project. The creation of this plan has provided opportunity for collaboration across the state, local, and national organizations to ensure our diverse populations and experts have joined us in this effort, including our own member Orr, who we appreciate for serving on our executive committee and helping to shape this plan. Next slide, please. So stakeholders, this was a big part. We included a lot of people. Our updated Nevada State Literacy Plan has been shaped through collaboration with key stakeholders, which includes NSHE, Nevada System of Higher Education, Regional Professional Development Programs, the Nevada State Public Charter School Authority, other policy makers and legislators, as well as administrators and educators, including our community members as well. Next slide, please. The new plan is connected to the STIP, which we've heard about today, and is supported in Governor Lombardo's AC and Accountability Initiative and incorporates the Nevada Portrait of a Learner as well by providing a framework that results in increased student achievement. We hope or expect. So, to ensure, next slide, I'm sorry, should be on slide 7. To ensure transparency, accountability, and inclusivity, the Nevada State Literacy Plan was developed through 3 levels of collaborative work groups. We had our executive committee, the advisory council, and the writing team. And just to give you an idea of who was who, the executive committee included the Nevada State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Chancellor of the Nevada System of Higher Education, some district superintendents, national literacy experts, and NDE staff. The advisory council was a group that was composed of the NSHE faculty specializing in literacy, multilingual education, school administrators, educators, regional professional development program staff, and the Nevada State Public Charter School Authority, as well as our own NDE staff. And then the writing team was a mixture of college faculty, RPDP folks, and educators from across Nevada. And after that, we incorporated a revision team to collect and gather feedback for the revision. Feedback. Next slide, please. So this slide should be the Executive Steering Committee, and we wanted to highlight their role by providing a high-level vision regarding literacy goals, making formal recommendations, and along the way, checking in to provide feedback on our progress. Next slide, please. So our advisory council supported the development of the plan. They were the reviewers of the data. They researched evidence-based instruction. They recommended what priorities and topics should be included in the plan. And they offered input on the look and feel of the document as it came to a conclusion. And finally, they responded to subsequent drafts of the plan for edits and revisions. Next slide, please. So our writing team role, they basically were the backbone of this project by examining the current literacy research, and they focused on the topics of their own expertise. They reviewed statewide data for trends and needs, and they brought a lot of clarity to what it was we decided to put in the final plan. Next slide, please. So as already mentioned, there have been many stakeholders involved with developing this plan. A few that we didn't mention yet is the NDE multi-tiered system of supports leadership team and the input from the Nevada Association of School Superintendents as well. Next slide, please. So here's a quick overview of the timeline of what we just described for the Nevada State Literacy Plan. We began working in February of 2024 with our advisory council. From there, we moved directly into the writing process, completing the first version around June. Following that, we entered the feedback collected and iterative revision phases began. This brings us to where we are today, and that is preparing for the next step for the implementation rollout. And this timeline highlights key milestones as we continue working to improve literacy in our state. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
So the new plan updates and revises the 2015 plan in the following ways. Wanted to show you the differences between the two plans. The new plan has vertical alignment. So rather than separating out recommendations by grade level, the new plan offers a comprehensive and vertically aligned approach to literacy in the service of the Nevada academic content standards. At the same time, the appendix includes helpful one-pagers that can help educators and leaders focus literacy instruction with specific grade bands. The 2015 plan spanned pre-kinder through adult literacy, and the new plan has focused on pre-kinder through grade 12.
Pre-kinder, but it's not inclusive of everyone.
The last decade of literacy research has expanded our understanding of literacy learning and has provided specific additions to guidance reading instruction. The new plan amplifies the research that provides evidence-based recommendations. Also, multi-tiered systems of support. The shift from RTI to MTSS in the last decade affords Nevada a system for identifying and responding to the literacy needs of Nevada students in real time. The new plan offers clear guidance on what MTSS is and how to use it at the systems level to support all students.
Multi-tiered system of services, multi-tiered.
With respect to adolescent readers, the new plan now includes guidance on disciplinary literacy to reflect
like you didn't have any guidance
standards and to ensure our students are prepared for college and career success. And finally, this updated plan positions Nevada to qualify for grant funding through comprehensive
that's what you think.
National Literacy Center and is supported by the U.S. Department of Education. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please.
The 2025 Nevada State Literacy Plan Advisory Council identified 6 priority areas to go in.
Forgot you're supposed to be doing it already.
Tier 1 instruction, assessment, MTSS, leadership, professional learning,
Mhm.
and family and community engagement. Within each of those sections, there is a description of each topic, including research evidence for why it was selected, a set of key practices for each topic, and a selection of actions for implementation for each key practice. Next slide, please.
Mhm.
So now that we have reviewed the development process and key milestones, let's look ahead to the next steps. The digital copy of the Nevada State Literacy Plan will be ready this spring for broader distribution.
Mhm.
As we move into the implementation phase, we will establish a collaborative framework, forming partnerships among the state, regional, and local agencies and higher education institutions, as well as community organizations. We will identify key stakeholders and assign roles to ensure a successful rollout.
Mhm.
In this phase, we will also develop professional learning opportunities, offering training for educators, administrators, and support staff on evidence-based literacy practices, ensuring everyone has the tools to succeed. The
Mhm.
training offerings will have a multifaceted design that can attract professionals who may want a hybrid, in-person, or even self-paced program to gain service learning hours or a micro-credential. And lastly, we want to engage families and communities in this phase by encouraging schools to adopt a robust culture that actively involves families in the shared decision-making for literacy priorities.
Y'all supposed to be always doing that.
To involve families in literacy achievement while partnering with community organizations to provide additional support. This implementation phase will ensure that the literacy plan is efficiently rolled out, creating meaningful and sustainable improvements across Nevada. The new literacy plan represents a pivotal step forward in Nevada's commitment to ensuring every student has the literacy skills necessary for success. By emphasizing balanced literacy practices, culturally responsive teaching, a research-based approach grounded in the science of reading, we are providing a roadmap for inclusive and equitable education. This plan not only supports academic achievement, but also empowers students to become critical thinkers, effective communicators, and lifelong learners. With the collective effort of policymakers, educators, and communities, we are shaping a brighter future for all Nevada students, one where literacy is the key to unlocking opportunities, closing achievement gaps, and driving lasting success in school and beyond. Next slide, please. Thank you all for your attention, for taking the time to engage with this important update. Your support and feedback has been and continues to be invaluable as we move forward. I would like to now open the floor for any questions or comments you may have, and I'm happy to address anything or provide further clarification.
Thank you so much on this presentation and the information provided. As we know, literacy is such a critical component to students' education. As a member of this work, I would like to offer Member Orr the opportunity to share any thoughts or
Y'all satisfaction, you're not.
Thank you. This is Member Orr.
Don't do what other states
I'm
do.
really honored to be a part of this process. This is a passion of mine.
Bet it is.
Very much involved with for many months, and I just want to say thank you to all of the members of the NDE staff who
many months and many years,
absolutely so much work, expertise, and really went through an incredible amount of iterations, taking into consideration not only so much new and updated research, but guidance from the community and really thoughtful approaches to thinking through ways of interpreting some of that new research in ways that would be meaningful for the community. So I just really could not be happier with how much the document really did morph and change over time to be more meaningful. And I'm very happy to have been a part of that process. I also wanted to thank the people that helped the process from West Ed. I know that Alicia Bowman was really important, at least my role on the executive steering committee, and really helpful, and took a lot of time to listen to pretty extensive feedback throughout the process. So thank you to all of that. And Doctors Diana Townsend and Dr. Darrell Kiernan, both of whom took lots of feedback, both behind the scenes and over lots and lots of months. I just think that we have some of the most brilliant minds in the state that took a lot of time and effort really caring about ensuring that this
California's done the
isn't
work. What is
something
Nevada doing?
just goes on shelves, but is something that will hopefully make meaningful change. So all of that being said, I'm looking forward to hearing comments from the rest of the board. I know that this wasn't a part of initial materials that were sent out, so maybe perhaps
What you know is what you know is limited.
into it, but I think
You
it's
talking shit.
posted now. But I do have just a few questions, and
you should ask.
By taking those from me. My first question would just be, what is the plan to get this plan into the hands of literacy specialists first, and have them kind of interact with it and work with it first, kind of see what their thoughts are.
Shauna Jessen, for the record, thank you, Member Orr, for those kind words and for calling.
Oh, they're so kind.
Weren't able to mention or didn't mention, there were so many people that were involved in that project. In response to your question,
so kind words.
Development, we do have a plan. We have started the work for moving the special development forward. First thing we need to do is get the plan finalized and printable. And then when that happens, we'll be able to move those into the schools. And our Read by 3 team is already
in place. You better understand that.
Development.
Read by grade 3 is a federal regulation. What y'all doing? Hello? Where are y'all? Hello.
Thank you, Ms. Jessen. Member Orr, was that the end of your question?
No questions, please.
Yeah, I had several questions about just next steps with implementation and professional learning, but it sounds like we don't know all of that. So I would just like to
sounds like you don't know shit.
Ask that at our next meeting we have some updates about what the next steps are, just because I guess the next most important thing after having this wonderful new state literacy plan will be, how are we going to get it out there, and how will I guess the most important thing will be,
how's everybody gonna get on board?
Planning look like, and how will we engage stakeholders in that?
Get on board, everybody.
Thank you, Member Orr. We will definitely include that at a future meeting and provide that update. And thank you for your leadership in this work. And also, please, to all on this board, as you read through that draft document that was posted, please do offer your feedback and comments via email.
Offer your expertise on the draft document
where they need to go.
Superintendent Hebert needs some support. Hello.
Member Hughes for the record. Thanks, Director Jessen, for sharing that. And I'm also excited. It sounds like at a future meeting, we'll dig into the actual plan itself. So we'll look forward to that.
Dig into the actual plan.
One thing that I heard you say, but I might have misheard, is you had mentioned balanced literacy. And I know my understanding is the current body of research in science of reading suggests that many of those practices actually are not very helpful. And so can you just clarify, you sort of named both science of reading, but also balanced literacy. And I know my understanding is that
balanced literacy
less precise around how phonics is taught, as well as some of the structures around that. So I might have misheard, but it sounds like there's some like conflicting theories embedded maybe.
Shauna Jessen for the record. Yeah, we are in favor of the science of reading. And so anything that I would have said in my comments would have been just to balance out all of the research that we found, not to refer to balanced reading or balanced literacy in a separate way. So thank you for the clarification. We definitely are pushing the idea that we support the science of reading.
And this is Member Orr for the record. All notations of balanced literacy have been removed from the document and do not appear in the document in any way.
Great, thank you for that. I had one more thought and I'm losing my thought. Yeah, I think the other piece, just to name again for a future conversation, is the implementation is obviously the hard part of this. And one of the things I would love us to look at in conjunction with the STIP is depending on where we land with high quality instructional materials. Some of this, like we don't necessarily need to be building in-depth knowledge of every single brain science piece of research, because in theory, high quality instructional materials do that for us in many ways. And so I feel like there's probably a conversation of bringing those two pieces together to make sure they go side by side.
Thank you, Member Hughes, for bringing that to our attention to keep at the forefront. I see no other questions from the board, so I will offer appreciation and thank you to you, Ms. Jensen, for the presentation and the information, and we will be speaking with you again. Thank you.
Madam President, I just have one quick comment.
Oh, please, Member Walker, our ghost member today.
A GOAT member.
Just took over somebody's office. Unfortunately, I'm sure she's ready for me to get out of here. I wanted to say, in addition to thanking Member Orr for her participation, I have a teacher leader at my school, and I know of teacher leaders from Carson City who also participated in the process. And I had quite a few conversations about how robust and how much work really went into this process. And so I want to make sure that we're also thanking the educators who were taken away from their classrooms and their schools to really help shape the work of the state. So I want to make sure that we recognize everybody and their contributions. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Walker. That is so incredible. And you're right, they do that above and beyond their regular duties. So we definitely want to appreciate the work they do. Moving on to agenda item 13, the board will now receive an update from Dr. Daniel Archer, Vice Chancellor for the Academic and Student Affairs for the Nevada System of Higher Education. Dr. Archer will provide insights into dual credit enrollment trends and discuss Align and Shine Nevada, a policy advisory group. Dr. Archer, please proceed when you are ready.
Oh, shit.
Well, I'm Daniel Archer, Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs, Nevada System of Higher Education. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here today. Appreciate the work you all do as a board and as a K-12 system. There's really three pieces I want to touch on today in this presentation. I'm going to provide some background on dual credit.
Dual credit.
Share some dual credit data I think you'll find pretty compelling, and then highlight some current work in the dual credit policy space that we're actively engaged in. So next slide, please. So we talk about dual credit. I think at the outset, it's really important to note that dual credit is really any case in which a high school student is taking a college course. So that's kind of our overarching, all-encompassing term. Anything under the sun that involves a high school student taking a college course is considered dual credit. And it sort of filters down into two distinct and separate buckets. The first of which is concurrent enrollment. Next slide, please. And essentially, this is any class taught by a high school instructor. So this is something that obviously is advantageous from an access standpoint because the college comes to the high school. It helps students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds because it eliminates the transportation barrier, helps our students in rural areas, so you have that. And then on the other side, you have dual enrollment. If you'll go ahead and move the slide, please. And this is any college class taught by an adjunct or full-time college instructor, which adjunct is a term I'm sure you're probably familiar with. It's a part-time college instructor. So any college course taught by a part-time or full-time college instructor. So again, dual credit is kind of our overarching term for everything. And then the line of demarcation when it filters down is who teaches the class. Concurrent enrollment is a high school instructor. Dual enrollment is a college instructor. Next slide, please. So these are some data. What we're looking at here is the number of high schools served by each respective dual credit category here. So the blue represents the number of high schools served through concurrent enrollment. The orange represents the number of high schools served through dual enrollment. And then the pink represents the number of high schools served through a combination of both concurrent and dual enrollment here. And obviously this is categorized by each of our 7 respective ICHE institutions here. Some you'll see are a little bit more balanced. UNLV kind of fits in that category. CSN is probably a little more balanced. Some lean more towards concurrent. You'll see UNR and NSU They're in blue or more heavy in the concurrent space, and then some lean more towards dual enrollment. Obviously, GBC being a case in point, Great Basin College there with 78 schools they work with through dual enrollment activities. So please change the slide again. And so this is our top 10 courses when we look at our dual credit students. And you'll see here, there's no surprise here that English composition 1 and 2 rank number 1 and number 2 respectively. Obviously, these are general education courses that are required for our baccalaureate degrees and our transfer associate degrees. So they have that broad scale applicability. And there's a number of other general education classes that are on here. I think one thing that has started to sort of take off out of nowhere is that economics and financial literacy. You'll see that it was at 0 for a number of years, and then all of a sudden it's over 1,000 students. And as many of you all probably remember, the state statute requires a financial literacy component for high school graduation. And so I would imagine that this course, among others, could be used as a means to meet that specific requirement. So again, we've seen really significant growth in that course just in the last few years. Change the slide, please. So this just highlights enrollment numbers here. And so again, we're looking at dual credit, again, as our overarching term for any case where high school students taking a college course. And you'll see that we were at just over 3,000 students in 14-15. That number jumped up to nearly 15,000 in 22-23. And while it's not on here, I did pull the 23-24 numbers that are the most up to date. And those were at 19,072. And so we went from just over 3,000 to 19,072 in 23-24, which represents a 523% increase. So obviously very significant growth has occurred in the dual credit space here in recent years. And as many of you all know, we've had a tuition discount in place since fall of 2022, so it's still relatively new, but students have paid a flat fee of $75 per course, not per credit hour, per course when it's concurrent enrollment. So obviously that has provided more opportunities for students to participate based on the affordability factor. Next slide, please. And then the next few slides just really get into some data here. And so one of the big things you'll see is this is essentially our public college going rate. So we're looking at our capture rate. We're looking at the percentage of Nevada public high school graduates that enroll at an NC institution within a 1-year period after high school graduation. In other words, what percentage of those students are we capturing in NC? You'll see the comparison. In orange, you have the students who did not participate in dual credit. And then in blue, you'll see a very stark contrast there, nearly about a 30 percentage point difference there when we compare the 21-22 data. So pretty significant differences there. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I got the weekend. I don't know what I did with
And very much the same thing when we get into persistence. You'll see some pretty notable differences when we compare, again, those who had a dual credit experience versus those who did not. What we're looking at here is the Nevada high school graduates that enrolled at an NC institution within a 1-year period after high school graduation. What percentage of those students came back the second year of college? What percentage did we retain and NC from year 1 to year 2 of college here? Again, we're comparing those who had a dual credit experience versus those who did, those who had a dual credit experience versus those who did not. And you'll see, again, over a 10 percentage point difference there in the most recent data set. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, of the Nevada high school graduates that enrolled at an NC institution within a 1-year period after high school graduation, what percentage earned a credential within a 6-year period after graduation? Again, you'll see that we were at 37.9% in 16-17. And then by comparison, when we look at our dual credit group, it was 56.7. So again, nearly a 20 percentage point difference for those who had a dual credit experience versus those who did not. I think it's also worth noting that when this topic comes up, there's usually somebody in the room that says, well, you're just talking about students who are ready to go to college. And it's worth noting that there's been a number of studies that have been done that have really had a laser focus and really focused down and really drilled down and found, okay, who are the average high school students and below average high school students? And let's compare those two. And that way you're really comparing apples to apples. You're not having the person who has a 30 ACT. You're really comparing average high school students and below average high school students.
You have an obligation to provide access to all. How are you doing it?
leads to higher access, leads to higher enrollment after college, and leads to early
Your
college
little
success. It
certificates of
leads
completion
to
just ain't working.
higher completion rates. It leads to graduating in less time. There are higher probability of completing in 4 years versus 6 for the baccalaureate students.
Wake
So
up.
it's something that is a win-win-win across the board in terms of access, success, completion.
Access, success, and completion. Yeah, look at your numbers dwindling.
So going forward here, we've created a group called Line and Shine Nevada, and Felicia Gonzalez,
Line and Shine,
who I really appreciate working with, appreciate all her efforts, and I are co-chairing. So what we're wanting to do here is we want to develop policy and procedures that really have a strong focus on access, success, and completion here. And we've got K-12 and higher education folks involved in a committee. On the K-12 side, we have individuals from NDE. We have individuals from district offices. We have individuals from high school sites. And on the higher education side, we have representatives from INSHE, and then all 7 of our INSHE campuses as well here. So we have people who hold kind of a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences and perspectives really come together to work on this here. So we've met 3 times. It's been very productive thus far here. Again, the focus is on developing policies and procedures. Please, next slide. And so when we talk about this, we really look at this through kind of a Western half of the U.S. lens, kind of from a policy perspective. Nearly every state has some sort of policy that sets expectations and standards for dual credit. Some are probably more extensive and expansive than others. Some of these are set by the legislature. Some of these are set by the State Higher Education Board. Obviously, in Nevada, we're going to be going toward the latter there. So
Nevada tries to
what
line
we're doing is very much along the lines of national norms, and really dual credit. The fact that it has grown in Nevada is not unique to the country. If you look at InsideHigherEd.com or Higher Education Chronicle, at least once a month, it seems like there's an article on the massive growth of dual credit. And so with that, obviously, there comes some growing pains and some opportunities to have some policy infrastructure, and that's kind of where we're at right now. And so in terms of some of the focus areas, please move the slide. Just want to hit on some of the key areas. So eligibility standards. We want to come up with something that's a reasonable predictor of success that we can use as a base entry point while still allowing some flexibility to students who may just be shy of that. We want to have support and guidance for high school teachers teaching college courses here. There's already some good work going on in this particular area here. We want to make sure that we have continuity and that we're on the same page about providing high school teachers with the supports and the guidance here. We want to make sure that they have an orientation, that they have some early training, that there's some guidance, there's some feedback, that they're evaluated the same way that college instructors evaluate. We want to make sure that all those pieces are in place. We also want to make sure that we're on the same page about college expectations in concurrent enrollment courses here. We want to ensure that the grading scale that's used on the college campus is used in the concurrent enrollment course. We also want to make sure that the syllabus that's used in the concurrent enrollment course is comparable to the same course that's offered on the
Get ready to get the data together. That's what I said.
We also want to make sure that our concurrent students have access to academic resources. Tutoring and library, I can definitely tell you from experience way back when I did concurrent enrollment, I wanted to get my math out of the way. So I did college algebra, and there's no way that I would have made it without having access to tutoring services. So really important that we're ensuring that those students are served and have the resources they need to be successful. We also are going to touch on faculty qualifications, which really boils down to who's qualified to teach the course.
They know what they have an obligation to do, and they know what they're not doing. So they really want to work on that.
Robust efforts in the data collection space here, so we can continually analyze data and make changes as needed, and really evaluate and assess the effectiveness of this program. So, stand for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Archer. I see Member Keys.
Thank you for coming and presenting to us. I am a dual credit student, so I've had a lot of experience, particularly with GBC. I find dual credit classes amazing. I'm so glad that we have them in here in Nevada. I'm getting my associate's degree when I graduate. One thing that I have noticed throughout my time on the board is that dual credit classes, or dual enrollment classes, they vary on what the K-12 side counts for their credits. Like, for example, this isn't true, but just English 101. One district could count it as an English class. One district could kind of as like an elective class for their credits for their high school. Does the Rise and Shine, does that have anything, are they working on that, making some kind of policy decisions on, we think that this class, whether it be like Bio 100, whatever, should that count for a science credit? Should that count as an elective credit on the high school side?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, Member Keys. And so this is the third state I've worked in. I've worked in 2 other state higher education systems prior to this, and this exact issue has come up the other states. So this is not a unique to Nevada type of issue. That's not necessarily on our agenda right now. I mean, I think that there are things we can look at. You know, some of the questions I would have is I'm not sure the difference between local control. I mean, we may be able to come up with a recommendation, and hopefully that would be adhered to. But I know in the previous states that I've been into, that's kind of the challenge we've got into, is that there are sometimes local control issues in that space. However, I think that particularly for some of our common in-sheet courses, because English 101 is English Composition 1, English 102 is Composition 2, and so forth. Some of those common courses, I think that would be advantageous to have that, and hopefully there would be some buy-in and would kind of grow organically. So I think there's some value to that. I definitely think that's something we could
Open the door and look.
The scope of this work, I think it fits.
He
So I think
wasn't
that's a really good point.
Thank you. Yeah, I know this had been brought up on the board previously.
Oh, did you see
I
how
forget
it's here?
exactly what, but it was a few meetings
Yeah, I
ago.
said, oh, yeah, that's Bishop here.
And we kind of decided, or we figured
Yeah.
that
Said that she
if
won't even
these
take no
classes
pay
are
from it.
being counted
I
for
said, that's
a
all right.
different
I said,
thing
she wanted to
across
use you.
the
And I said,
state,
you need to use
that
your brother for the
one
family.
student can
She
have an
wants to use
easier
some photo
college
shoot. And I said,
graduation
you're the
than
best
another
thing you do.
student if in
You know,
NG we're saying
have to
that they're
humble
the same
themselves.
classes. So once
See
we
you
get
later.
that, it would be great to see some sort of alignment across the state. And I appreciate your work specifically with getting services to dual enrollment students or concurrent enrollment students. I myself
What is that? The alarm is
definitely
2
haven't
o'clock.
taken advantage of everything that GBC has to offer when it comes to tutoring, just because I feel so like disconnected from that side of it, from being a college student. And so I really appreciate the work that you're doing with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Keys, for highlighting that, providing some practical examples of what's happening. And you're right, this conversation has come up before in the past on this board about how each district counts these classes differently for credit. So as this work progresses,
Let me know what you
if
didn't
there's
get.
any work
Oh,
that the board
make
can do
sure.
from a regulatory standpoint to support that
They
alignment,
just
please
want
let
to
us know. Member Hughes?
Yeah, just to jump in on that point, member use of the record. I do think that we ultimately have to sign off, right, on the dual enrollment courses. And so that could, I mean, so maybe that's a decision we make. Like, could we set a framework like we're actually not going to approve if you're counting this for that, right? So there might be some ability we have to at least make them more similar. So appreciate you raising that. The only thing I was going to add is just some input that I've received that lines with this. So just appreciate this work. I've talked to a bunch of high school principals recently, and they have, expressed frustration with the different experiences working with different institutions in the state. And so a lot of them are saying like, I'm dropping this partner and moving to this other partner because they're more flexible and accommodating and do this with my teacher system. So I just appreciate that we're trying to take a systematic approach because I think at the school level, they're feeling the disconnect and how they're operating. So appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Dr. Archer? Seeing none, thank you so much for this work, and we look forward to learning more as it moves forward. Now we will move on to agenda item 15, and the board will receive an update on the emergency federal relief funds allocated to states, districts, private schools, and the State Public Charter School Authority. This update will be presented by State Superintendent, Superintendent Ebert. So please proceed when you're ready.
Great, thank you. So a high-level summary of all of the funds that have been made available to our state via the federal government. Next slide, please, David.
High level summary. High level summary.
Funds that were made available were the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Funds, or CARES Act. You see the second set of funds, Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And then the third set of funds, American Rescue Plan, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief. The second set of funds, most people refer that to, if you'll hear ESSER $1, kind of a shortcut. People were having a time.
She's trying to explain how the public doesn't have any involvement.
It's referred to, if you'll hear interchangeably, ESSER 1 funds, and then the final set of.
ESSER 1 is Every Child Succeed Act. Yeah, right.
So next slide, with the CARES dollars, the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security, there were two pots of funding.
All federal restricted funding.
$1 trillion across the United States. And most of these funds, the first set of funds dealing with the pandemic, health, mental health, security.
You listen to the
cleaning supplies.
They use the allocation
of those dollars invested as we move forward. The second set of funds, ESSER 1 funding, elementary and secondary school emergency relief, was $117 million. 90% of those funds went directly to the local education agencies. Address learning loss.
We're talking about local control. We're talking about what the states actually did. The state still has an obligation to create access. We're going to see
a shift across what school districts were providing or ordering for their students at that moment of time. ESSER on slide 5, we have the $117,185,045 that were allocated directly to the state. And I have a summary slide at the end.
Just watching.
All of these funds were to be obligated by September 21st. Again, here
it's funny to me because they have to identify the funds and demonstrate how they made a benefit to people who generated those
portion of those funds that were made available for devices themselves. Another set of
she's trying to explain how local people did it.
The Coronavirus Aid and Relief Economic Security, so the CARES, was a subset of funding called GEAR funding.
We're only talking about federal money and how it's supporting the students who are generating those dollars, generating the money.
I knew there was a larger gap in the K-12 needs. And so the funds were allocated to K-12, $26 million.
Yeah, allocated to K-12. But guess what? K-12 didn't serve everybody.
Requirements for expenditures. The funding status for Gear 1 on slide 7. That was roughly $26 million. It was allocated.
The legislature can approve anything, but they still have to meet the needs of the people. We're looking for the needs being met.
Those funds, we spent 97.6%.
And that is the Department of Health and Human Services. And that's where she's.
The second round on slide 8 of funding, the ESSER and GEAR funds. Nevada received the largest set of funding here, which was $477 million. 90% of those accounts to LEAs, the remaining 10% were held at the state level.
Because we all need to be
at that time. On slide 9,
and believe me, when they send these children to
kind of see our pattern here.
And
we're Texas with the expenditures, and I would like to get to the summary slide because I think it shares with you where we're at in all of this funding. We funded with approval. There's one thing that's important to note here is
state of Nevada. It's better because we're talking about states' rights. That means time for us to
these funds. We had to go to the legislature and get their approval to be able to expend these funds. Colleagues around the United States.
Yeah, I recorded it and put it up there. It's
some other states, the Department of Education can directly move forward.
It's all about the money, but if they can't demonstrate how they utilize the money, we're still in a problem situation.
People would ask, well, how come you're not getting the funds out as quickly as state XYZ? And everybody's moving as fast. There was just different processes. We'll make sure we're comparing apples to apples. On slide 10, again, Gear 2 funding. So these were funds that were allocated to the governor at that moment in time.
No, she's talking about the governor has flexibility.
K-12 education.
Now you need to understand the flexibility the governor has when the state does not do the work.
The largest, totaling
is an ad hoc committee kind of thing.
$122 billion across the United States.
But the people. The people
90%
he
went
should
to
be affected,
LEA
should be affected.
and the
And they're
continued
not.
to make sure that schools were reopening and
So here we are,
addressing
zippity doo dah, zippity yay.
on slide 12 for Nevada, we received approximately $1 billion. That funding needed to be obligated. by
Opportunity
September
scholarships
2024.
go to those
We
families who didn't qualify for the K-12
for
funding.
late liquidation and moving forward with, again, sample.
He's going to be in trouble with those state scholarships. That's where the Republican Party would like to be.
Today is an overall summary of all of those components and where we are.
They have to have some data for that ESSER money. Every child succeed meant that they were doing the work in the local community. They are not.
Colleagues in the Nevada Department of Education that
We're
have
talking about the homeless people.
since the pandemic.
Talking about all of these.
Got out the door, if you will. We're
Jason just did it for them. We're going to see how well
education, nonprofit organizations.
And there's a relationships with not-for-profit organizations that hold the key to the state of
which
Nevada.
we're grateful for, but added to the work that we're already running, it was a huge lift for everyone within the department and across the state.
That's why they have the relationship with West Ed. Trying to say
rather quickly, we were able to expend those dollars. We did revert 1.5 million
West
back
Ed
to
to save them.
In that instance, it was one of our partners that we learned a lesson in tracking that we found late in the process that they were not able to expend those dollars. And because it was late in the process, we were not able to reallocate.
That's right.
So now, as we move
that
forward,
money is sitting there.
Monitoring, working with our partners, making
got to work with the governor to try to expel those dollars.
On time with the intended purpose that they were meant for. ESSER 2, we're still in the process of late liquidation.
Late liquidation.
$1 million there. You can see the percentage overall is 99%.
Look at all that money remaining.
Already been expended and reimbursed. So we're pleased, but we want to make sure that that gets to zero. That's
Look
what
at all that money just sitting on the table.
Driving to make sure that none of these funds are reverted back to the
hospital for.
In ESSER 3, we're in the process of liquidating those funds as well. 96%, 96%.
They can't demonstrate that they're offering services for the children.
And then you can see, I won't drill in on each and every one of these.
They don't have any data for the children who have been incarcerated at the age of 11 to their state policy.
Late liquidation. That is a process that we work with the federal government.
They're only talking about 6 beds, continue to make sure beds, just like the 6 beds for the children who are,
as you can see at the end of that slide, we have
circumstances of
federal relief tracker. We have been held up across the United States for.
No, it's not 60. I believe me, it is 6. I heard them say 6 clearly.
Transparency earlier. These are public dollars. What are these public dollars being used for? This tracker has been up for
They've never had to come up with more than 2 years of data. This is
exactly where the dollars are flowing and how school districts are using those funds. So with that, I stand ready.
Reno is building uplands. Yes, they are.
Thank
but,
you, Superintendent. $1.7 is a huge lift. So thank you for adding that to your already busy department's to-dos.
To-do list.
I have a question about the expenditure of any remaining funds. Are those already dedicated to
the real deal is that disproportionality has to be addressed within the state?
Great question, Superintendent Ebert. For the record,
and I see Danielle Ford
slides, and we're very intentional. Is that in those slides they say obligated. And so by this last set of funds, by September 30th, all of the funds must be obligated. And that means for specific projects. At this moment in time, we cannot say, we found a wonderful project. We do see funds that are made available.
they all must have already been approved and through the process. So there are no new projects that can be accepted.
That's right. The federal government's got to approve those federal dollars.
Thank you. Any other?
That's what we're
questions?
gonna watch and see. How they approve it. Boo, how do they approve it?
Appreciate that update. Thank you so
Appreciate
much,
the update.
Superintendent. Yes. Now I would like to briefly revisit agenda item 4, the Vice President's report, and provide an update on the AB 469 subcommittee. We will be reconvening.
I know she's just tickled to death. She gets to ask them the questions. They got to come up with the answers.
Board is invited to participate, and please send Angie an email if you are interested, and we will make sure to include you. At that future meeting date, we will finalize a committee membership and select a chair. Member Keys, jump in.
Also, since we're back at the reports, I forgot to say Happy School Board Appreciation Month for January. I forgot to say that.
The student representative is pretty cool.
So now we will move on to item 16, future agenda items. As you see here, we have State Board of Education, the bylaws and training, absenteeism and truancy, developmental delay, and disabilities education.
Well, that's going to be exciting. Developmental delay.
Exit age. Are there any additional future agenda items?
Truancy and behavioral
that we would like to see included?
I just don't have to figure it all out because disproportionality is
interested in a potential school board sign off on the innovation committee work. We need to discuss that. So again, that would just be sort of signing our name, saying, is it sent to the legislature?
Did you see all the intelligent people coming up with their analysis of how they spend the money?
We're having a discussion. And then the second thing is because we have
and I thought it was hilarious because you see, I think Title I says 30, 60, 90 days into the
evaluation. As a board, I know one thing that we had called out was how we're making decisions about what gets agendized or not, sort of how we're structuring to be efficient as impactful as possible. So that might be, again, with a new group, might be worth sort of revisiting.
And you heard Joan say how
we want to sort of tweak or modify.
Difficult it was to work with everybody in the room. She just
thank you, Member Hughes. There were two things that I had written down from previous conversations in the meeting. One is that we looked to see about the possibility of providing clarifying language about who can add charter to the name of their school, and to see if that's something that we might need to take some
charters are not supposed to be included, maybe in state policy, but not in the federal regulation.
In terms of modifying our bookend dates for our vision and goals, and then also the process for our participation in the development of that document. Member Keys?
I believe this was already said earlier, but I just want to make sure it gets on the agenda for agendizing if we want to endorse the invest plan from NAS. Then
charter schools are just not in
here last legislative session, but I know that
to support charters.
from what I've heard, you guys got a list of bills that you voted to either endorse or we had a list that we could, have our say in the legislature. So I was just wondering.
And as Nevada still has this thing called cabaret tax, where they charge entertainers a higher rate than the people in the community need to demand that we legislate those resources that are coming to our
regular updates. Some were weekly emails or bi-weekly, depending on the frequency. And then there were items that we would talk about as a bring forward as a board. So if Superintendent Ebert would like to elaborate on that, she's welcome to. Otherwise, let's proceed as last time. Okay. Okay. Any other items here? All right. We'll move on to Member Orr. I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to reiterate that I would love to hear more about the literacy plan implementation work.
I just want to hear about read by grade 3.
I know
they plan on doing by the read by grade 3 is
to go back to ending. I had to leave the last meeting because of
I'm listening.
Issues.
Like I said,
so I just
federally they have an obligation to reach all 3-year-olds. Where are they?
Sure we were following through with that. I wanted to
make
sure that we had updates on how the process was going for moving forward with the new read by grade 3 test and going through the process for that. I thought that we were going to be getting some updates with that process as well. And then I just had some questions, and I'm not sure if everyone else on the board is more familiar with this, but if we had any ability to talk about the timeline for state testing and how that has creeped ever forward in the year, and if the board could look at moving that later in the year.
Thank you, Member Orr. I'm glad we were able to capture all those many items. Thank you for including them. I can provide a brief update on the Read by Grade 3. There are many different subcommittees currently working on the different items under that law, and one of them is selecting the uniform examination that will be that this board will have to determine the cut score for. So once they are ready to present to the board, we will receive that information. Okay, now we'll move on to public comment number 2. Public comment may be submitted to the board secretary at nbboarded@doe.nv.gov. Our secretary will read public comments into the record with a time limit of 3 minutes. If the comments exceed 3 minutes in length, the full text will be entered into the record and circulated to the board. Please note that public comments submitted after the board has officially adjourned will not be included in the record. I will begin with any members of the public who have attended to provide comments in person. Please fill out a comment card. Be sure to turn on the microphone and begin by stating your name for the record. We will limit your comments to 3 minutes. We will take public comment in Carson City first and then Las Vegas. Are there any public comments in Carson City?
There is no public comment in Carson City.
In Las Vegas?
We have one public comment in Las Vegas.
Perfect. We have Miss Anna Binder.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Superintendent Eber, and Principal Stewart, and Binder for the record. I'm here today because, as most people know, I'm a mother of 6. 3 of my children have autism, all varying all over that spectrum. But my youngest son, we're in a Title I 2-star school. So a few years back, we lost our incredible J1 teacher to a 4 or 5-star school. And my son just has not been performing. He's been stuck with a long-term substitute, and he has now moved up into the primary autism 3 to 5 class. And his current long-term substitute is his former SPTA. She is a mother also to a 15-year-old autistic son, nonverbal, who attends high school with my 15-year-old autistic son. And she is so amazing. This year, Legend was the top achieving math growth with her. He hasn't seen things like that since he had the J1 teacher. It's been extremely difficult the last couple of years. Fighting for him. But she went in and did her ARL, and I can't imagine how she's done that with the needs of her son, and then also working full time to support him. But she relayed to me when I asked her what she needed for Christmas. So when she knew obviously that our school had 2 openings for primary autism, the K to 2 and 3 to 5. And so she checked with everybody, and she applied to be the primary autism teacher for the 3 to 5 class. Long story short, because she goes to GCU, they don't offer the little check mark for the autism. She's passed her praxis. She's just pending taking the autism part of the praxis. And if she would have gone through something else, the district would have hired her as a full-time teacher with benefits and provided her with 3 years to obtain that autism endorsement. Thank you. But because she did the ARL, they won't hire her, and she's not afforded a 3-year grace period to get that when she is probably the most qualified and highly effective educator for not just my son, but the other children assigned to her class in her school. And so I told her I would be here today to advocate for her, because this sounds like something that the state can do to help, because if she's one, do we have others? And I know over the years that when educators have had the opportunity to bring these issues to you, that we've been able to try to figure it out. And so she's there full time. being paid as a long-term sub with absolutely no health benefits. For what? Like, for what? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Binder. Let's definitely connect and follow up on this. Thank you for.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt President Dockweiler, but we actually have one more public comment.
Okay, it looks like it might be Ed Gonzalez.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President, members of the board. For the record, my name is Ed Gonzalez, community member of Hickey Elementary School organizational team. Reason I'm speaking on this one is that March 3rd through 7th is Nevada Reading Week. And as you know, Hickey has always invited the entire state board to come read. Our namesake, Lilian Lujan Hickey, was a member of the State Board of Education. She was the first Hispanic Latina to serve on the board. So we've had the honor of having President Dockweiler, Member Hughes, Member Carlton, Dad Gardner read as well as many others. If you see me walk in the room chatting with people, I'm usually asking this time of year about it. We have a lot of fun. We're on the northeast part of town. We are technically in CD4, but most of our residents do live in CD1. So we're right on the corner of everything. So you'll be getting out invitations onto it. State Superintendent, we'd be more than happy to have you, but it's legislative session, so I understand. We have a lot of people who are, I like to say, I consider important, but everybody's important when they come read. So I have friends, I have people who are involved in the legislative process. So it's always really interesting because they'll call me and commit on a Monday, and then a bill comes up, and then it's Tuesday, and then maybe it's Thursday, but I think it's Wednesday, and it ends up being Friday. so the odd years is just a little bit different. But like I said, we'll be sending out invitations to every single one. If you're able to come to Hickey, we would be honored as always. If not, have the opportunity just to read at a school within either your district or just state superintendent. I'm pretty sure you'll be doing it up in the north. So thank you so much, Madam President. That's all I have.
Yes, I have. Thank you so much for the invitation. All right, have any comments been submitted online?
We have no public comments submitted online.
Okay, well, thank you all for your time today. And our next scheduled board meeting will take place in March, March 12th at 9 a.m. If there are no further questions, this meeting is adjourned.
Okay.
2:22.
All right, they're done. 2:22. And thank you all for dropping by.